I drove 400 miles to surprise my son for Thanksgiving, only to find my 7-year-old grandson shivering in a snowbank wearing nothing but a t-shirt and shorts while the thermometer read 15 degrees. Inside the warm, glowing mansion, the rest of the family was carving a 20-pound turkey and laughing as they raised their crystal wine glasses. I did not knock. I did not ring the doorbell. I went back to my truck, grabbed my heavy-duty crowbar, and kicked the solid oak door off its hinges. When the dust settled and the screaming stopped, I looked my son and his wife in the eye and said 6 words that turned their faces ghost white. Before I tell you what those words were and how I exposed the darkest secret of this perfect suburban family, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. My name is Bernard Freeman. I am 69 years old, and for 40 years I worked as an industrial electrical engineer. I spent my life in high-voltage zones, fixing grids that powered entire cities and filing patents that nobody knows bear my name. I retired quietly. I drive a rusted '98 Ford F-150. I wear Carhartt jackets stained with grease, and I live in a cabin 3 states away because I prefer the sound of fishing lines to the noise of the city. To the world, I look like an old man who barely scraped by. To my son Darnell, I am just the blue-collar father who paid for his college but embarrasses him in front of his new corporate friends. That Thursday morning, the sky over Connecticut was a bruised purple, and the wind cut through my layers like a razor blade. I had decided to drive down unannounced. I missed my grandson Leo. Leo is 7. He is a quiet boy with big eyes that always seem to be searching for an exit. He has a stutter that gets worse when he is nervous, and lately he has been nervous all the time. My son Darnell married Brittany 3 years ago. Brittany comes from what she calls old money, though I have been around long enough to know that money talks, but wealth whispers, and Brittany never stops screaming about her status. She tolerates me. She tolerates Leo, who is Darnell's son from a previous relationship, but she does not love him. I suspected she was cold, but I never imagined she was a monster. I pulled my truck up the long, winding driveway of the colonial-style house in the gated community. It is a beautiful house. $1.5 million of brick and stone. I parked behind a line of luxury SUVs that belonged to Brittany's parents, the Harringtons. I checked the temperature on my dashboard. 15 degrees Fahrenheit. With the wind chill, it felt like 0. I grabbed the pecan pie I had baked from scratch sitting on the passenger seat and opened the door. The cold hit me instantly. It was the kind of cold that hurts your lungs. As I walked up the path lined with perfectly trimmed cedar bushes, I saw something that made my heart stop beating in my chest. To the left of the porch, tucked behind a decorative statue of a pilgrim, there was a small shape curled into a ball. At first I thought it was a dog. Then I saw the skin. It was pale blue. I dropped the pie. The glass dish shattered on the frozen pavement. I ran through the snow, my bad hip screaming in protest, but I did not care. I fell to my knees in the snow. It was Leo. My grandson was sitting directly on the ice, hugging his knees to his chest. He was wearing a thin graphic t-shirt and gym shorts. No coat, no hat, no shoes. His feet were buried in the snow, and they were the color of plums. Leo. I gasped, pulling him into my arms. He was shaking so violently his teeth were clicking together like hail on a tin roof. He looked at me and his eyes were wide with terror, not relief. "Grandpa," he stuttered, his voice barely a whisper. Don't tell." Mom Brittany said I have to sit in the timeout corner. I broke a plate. Timeout. She called this a timeout. This was not discipline. This was attempted murder. I touched his cheek and it felt like marble. He had been out here for a long time. Too long. I did not say a word. I scooped him up. He weighed nothing. He felt fragile like a bird that had fallen from a nest. I ran back to my truck. I threw the door open and placed him on the passenger seat. I cranked the engine and blasted the heater to the maximum setting. I ripped off my heavy work jacket and wrapped it around him, then took the wool blanket I keep behind the seat and wrapped that around him too. "Stay here, Leo," I said, my voice trembling with a rage I had not felt since I fought in the desert 40 years ago. "Do not move. Get warm." But Grandpa Leo cried, grabbing my wrist with his frozen fingers. "If I go inside before the timer rings, she will take my iPad. She will tell Dad I am bad." I looked at my grandson. He was worried about an iPad while hypothermia was setting in. I looked at his back as I adjusted the blanket and I saw the flinch. He was terrified, not of the cold, but of the woman inside that house. "I'm going to handle this, Leo," I said. "Lock the door." I slammed the truck door and turned toward the house. Through the large bay window of the dining room I could see them. The golden light of the chandelier spilled out onto the snow. It looked like a Norman Rockwell painting. Darnell was at the head of the table wearing a cashmere sweater holding a carving knife over a massive golden turkey. Brittany was next to him, laughing, her head thrown back, a glass of white wine in her hand. Her parents, the Harringtons, were passing rolls and looking smug. They were warm, they were full, they were safe. And less than 30 feet away, a 7-year-old boy was freezing to death because he broke a ceramic plate. I stood there in the snow for a moment just watching them. I remembered my own childhood in the projects of Chicago. I remembered nights when the heat got cut off because my father couldn't pay the bill. I remembered huddled under 3 quilts with my brothers, seeing our breath in the air. I swore on my mother's grave that if I ever made it out, no one in my bloodline would ever know that cold again. I worked double shifts for 20 years. I climbed utility poles in ice storms. I built a fortune silently so my son could have this life. And this is what he did with it. He sat eating turkey while his son froze. The rage did not come as fire. It came as ice. It settled in my stomach, heavy and cold. I walked back to the bed of my truck. I opened the toolbox. My hands knew exactly what to grab. My old iron crowbar, heavy, solid, rusted at the tip. I marched up the front steps. I did not wipe the snow off my boots. I did not check my reflection in the glass. I did not prepare a polite greeting. I could see Darnell raise a toast inside. I could see Brittany checking her phone, probably posting a picture of her perfect table setup on Instagram. I stepped up to the massive double oak doors. They were locked, of course. They kept the cold out. They kept the unwanted out. I swung the crowbar. The sound of wood splintering echoed like a gunshot in the quiet neighborhood. I didn't stop at the lock. I kicked the door right at the latch with the heel of my work boot. The frame gave way. The door swung open violently, banging against the interior wall with a crash that shook the house. I stepped into the foyer. The heat of the house hit me instantly, smelling of sage and roasted meat. The scene in the dining room froze. Darnell dropped the carving knife. It clattered onto the china. Brittany jumped up, knocking over her wine glass. Red wine spilled across the white tablecloth like a blood stain. Her mother gasped, clutching her pearls. Her father stood up, his napkin falling to the floor. They stared at me. A large black man in a dirty flannel shirt, snow melting on his shoulders, holding a crowbar, breathing hard. Dad Darnell stammered, his voice pitching high. "What are you doing? You broke the door. Are you crazy?" Brittany recovered from her shock first. Her face twisted into a snarl. She did not look toward the window to check on Leo. She did not ask where the boy was. She looked at the door frame. "You lunatic," she screamed, pointing a manicured finger at me. "Do you know how much that custom door cost? You are paying for that. Get out. Get out of my house before I call the police." She stepped toward me, fearless in her arrogance. She was used to people obeying her. She was used to Darnell folding like a cheap suit every time she raised her voice. But I was not Darnell. I looked at my son. He was looking at the floor, avoiding my eyes. He knew. Deep down, he knew. He knew Leo was outside. He knew it was freezing. And he sat there and ate. I looked at Brittany. She was standing there in her designer dress, worried about wood and varnish, while a child was turning blue in my truck. I gripped the crowbar tighter. My knuckles were white. The silence in the room was heavy, thick with the smell of food and the stench of their hypocrisy. I took one step forward into the dining room. My boots left muddy slush on the Persian rug. "Get out of my house now," I said. My voice was low. It was not a scream. It was a rumble from the earth. Brittany laughed. It was a shrill, nervous sound. "Your house? You senile old fool. Darnell bought this house. You just visit here. You don't have the authority to tell me to leave my own home. Darnell, tell him. Tell your father to leave." She turned to Darnell, expecting him to bark at me. Darnell looked at me, then looked at Brittany. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Brittany's father, Mr. Harrington, puffed out his chest. "Now see here, Bernard. We are trying to have a civilized holiday. You barge in here like a common thug destroying property. I think you have been drinking. I suggest you leave before this gets ugly." "Ugly," I repeated. "You want to see ugly." I turned around and walked back out into the cold. They followed me confused. They stood on the porch, hugging themselves against the wind. "Where are you going?" Brittany shouted. "Don't you walk away from me when I am talking to you." I opened the truck door. I reached in and unbuckled Leo. He was starting to get some color back, but he was still shivering. I picked him up, wrapping the blanket tighter around him. I carried him up the steps, past Brittany, past her parents, past Darnell. I walked right into the dining room and placed my grandson on the head of the table right next to the turkey. He sat there, a small, trembling bundle on the expensive tablecloth. His bare feet were purple. His lips were chapped. "Look at him!" I roared. Brittany rolled her eyes. "Oh, for God's sake, he is fine. He needed to cool off." "Cool. He has a temper. He broke a plate, Bernard. A Williams-Sonoma plate. He needs to learn respect." "He is 7, I shouted. "It is 15 degrees. He was freezing to death while you drank wine." "He has a jacket out there," Brittany lied smoothly. "He probably took it off to make me look bad. He is manipulative like that, just like his mother was." I looked at Leo. He shook his head, tears streaming down his face. "No jacket, Grandpa. She hid it." I looked at Darnell. "Did you know?" Darnell looked at his wife. She glared at him, a warning in her eyes. I didn't realize it was that cold," Darnell mumbled. "Brittany said he was fine. She said he was watching the iPad on the porch." "Liar," I hissed. Mr. Harrington stepped forward. "Look, this is a parenting matter. You don't interfere with how they raise the boy. Now take the kid off the table and get out. You are ruining Thanksgiving." I looked at Mr. Harrington. I looked at this room full of people who thought they were better than me because they wore suits and I wore work boots. They thought they owned the world. They thought this house was their fortress. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I dialed a number. I put it on speaker. "Mr. Strickland," I said. A voice answered immediately, crisp and professional. "Happy Thanksgiving, Mr. Freeman. Is there an emergency?" "Yes," I said, keeping my eyes locked on Brittany. "Initiate the eviction clause immediately and call the sheriff. I want to report child endangerment and trespassing. Eviction clause." Brittany laughed. "Who are you calling? Your imaginary lawyer. Darnell pays the mortgage on this house. It is in his name. You have lost your mind." Darnell turned a shade of gray I had never seen before. He sank into his chair. "Brittany," he whispered. Brittany, shut up. "Why should I shut up?" Brittany snapped. "Your father is having a breakdown." "He isn't having a breakdown," Darnell said, his voice cracking. He is the landlord." The room went silent. The only sound was the wind howling through the broken front door. "What did you say?" Brittany asked, her voice dropping. "I didn't qualify for the mortgage," Darnell whispered, looking at his plate. "My credit was too low because of the student loans." Dad bought the house through his LLC. I pay him rent. It is his house." Brittany looked at me. Her eyes went wide. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She looked at her parents, who looked like they had just swallowed a lemon. "That's right," I said, stepping closer to her. "I bought this house. I bought the car you drive. I paid for the wedding you bragged about. I did it because I loved my son and I wanted him to have a good start, but I see now that I just financed a monster." I looked at Darnell. "I told you when you moved in here, Darnell. I told you there was one rule. You take care of your family. You protect this boy." I picked up the carving knife from the table. Brittany flinched. I used it to cut a piece of turkey and handed it to Leo, who ate it like he hadn't seen food in days. "You failed," I said to Darnell. Then I looked at Brittany. "Get out." But we have nowhere to go." Brittany stammered, tears instantly welling up in her eyes, though I knew they were fake. "My parents are visiting. We have guests. It is Thanksgiving." "I don't care," I said. "You put a child in the snow. You can join him. You can't do this." Mr. Harrington blustered. "There are laws, squatters' rights. We have 30 days. Mr. Strickland's voice came through the phone loud and clear. "Actually, the lease agreement Darnell signed has a specific clause regarding criminal activity on the premises, including child abuse. The lease is void effective immediately. The sheriff is 5 minutes away." Brittany turned on Darnell. "Do something. He is your father. Fix this." Darnell looked at me. "Dad, please." "Not tonight. Let's just talk." "There is no talking, Darnell," I said. "You watched your son freeze. You chose her over him. Now you can live with her, but not under my roof." I walked over to the front door and pulled it open wider, letting the freezing wind blast into the hallway. "You have 5 minutes to grab your coats," I said. "After that, I am locking the gate." Brittany screamed. She threw her wine glass at the wall. She cursed me. She cursed Darnell. She cursed Leo. But when she heard the sirens in the distance, she ran for her coat. I stood there holding my grandson wrapped in my old work jacket, watching the people who thought they were royalty running like rats. They grabbed their purses and their phones. They didn't even pack a bag. As they walked out the door, Brittany stopped. She looked at me with pure hatred. "You will regret this," she hissed. "You will die alone, old man, and you will never see your son again." I looked at Darnell, who was trailing behind her, head down, defeated. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at Leo. He just walked out into the cold, following the woman who controlled him. I slammed the broken door shut as best I could and propped a chair against it. I picked up Leo and carried him to the fireplace. I put another log on the fire. "Are they coming back?" Grandpa Leo asked, his teeth finally stopping their chattering. "No, son," I said. "They are never coming back." I sat there in the big empty house with my grandson eating cold turkey and pie while the blue lights of the sheriff's car flashed through the window. I knew this was just the beginning. Brittany would not go quietly. She would come back with lawyers and lies. Darnell would try to worm his way back in. But as I looked at Leo sleeping safely in my arms, I knew one thing for sure. I had spent my whole life building power grids, but tonight I had finally used that power to protect the only thing that mattered. This was war, and I was just getting started. The silence that followed my entry was not the silence of remorse, it was the silence of shock. The wind howled through the broken doorframe, carrying snow into the foyer, but Brittany did not look at the child shivering on her chair. She did not rush to hold him. She did not call for a blanket. Instead, she walked right past Leo and fell to her knees in front of the splintered wood of the door jamb. She ran her manicured fingers over the jagged edge where the lock used to be, her face twisted into a mask of pure, ugly vanity. "You savage," she screamed, turning her head to look at me with eyes that held no soul. "Do you have any idea what you have done? This is custom mahogany. We had this imported. It cost $4,000. You come in here like some wild animal and destroy my home." She stood up and marched toward me, her heels clicking sharply on the hardwood. She was trembling, but not from the cold. She was shaking with the rage of a spoiled child whose toy had been broken. She pointed a finger in my face. Her nail was painted a perfect shade of blood red. "Look at this mess," she shrieked, gesturing to the snow melting off my boots onto her Persian rug. "You are ruining everything." This was supposed to be a perfect dinner. I have followers waiting for photos. I have guests. And you drag that dirty, freezing brat in here and break my house. Who is going to pay for this, Bernard? You. You are going to pay for every cent of this damage. I looked at her. I looked at the woman my son had married. I saw the emptiness inside her. She was worried about a piece of wood. She was worried about the likes on her social media. Less than 5 feet away, a 7-year-old boy was turning purple and she was calculating the cost of a carpenter. Leo coughed a wet hacking sound that rattled in his small chest. Brittany didn't even flinch. She didn't even blink. "Get him off that chair," she snapped. "He is wet." "That is Velvet Bernard. Do you know how hard it is to get water stains out of velvet? But you wouldn't know that, would you? You live in a shack, you don't know the value of anything." "You call me a savage," I said, my voice low and steady. "You leave a child to die in the snow for a broken plate and you call me the savage." "He wasn't going to die," she scoffed, rolling her eyes. "He needs to learn. He is clumsy. He is loud. He ruins everything, just like you are ruining this night." Before I could answer, a hand clamped down on my shoulder. It was heavy and smelled of expensive cologne. I turned to see Mr. Harrington, Brittany's father, standing there. His face was flushed with wine and indignation. He was a tall man, used to looking down on people, used to being the most important person in the room. He looked at my flannel shirt. He looked at my grease-stained hands. He looked at my face and his lip curled in disgust. "Now you listen here, Freeman," he said, his voice dripping with that specific kind of poison that rich men use when they talk to the help. "We are civilized people here. We do not solve problems with violence. But I suppose I should not be surprised. It is in your nature, isn't it?" I knew exactly what he meant. I had heard that tone for 69 years. I had heard it from foremen who thought I couldn't read blueprints. I had heard it from bankers who denied my first loan applications until I showed them my patent portfolio. It was the sound of a man who thought his skin color and his bank account made him a god. "You barge into a decent neighborhood like a thug." Harrington continued, stepping closer, trying to use his height to intimidate me. "You break property. You threaten women. You clearly don't belong here. Look at you. You look like a gardener who got lost. I should call the police and have you dragged out in cuffs. That is where people like you usually end up, isn't it? Isn't. My hand tightened on the crowbar. I could have dropped him. I could have laid him out right there on the floor next to the spilled wine. I have fought men twice his size and 10 times his worth. But I did not move. I did not give him the satisfaction of being the monster he wanted me to be. I gave him something worse. I gave him my silence. I turned my back on him. I dismissed him completely, as if he were nothing more than a fly buzzing in the room. I walked past him and went to the table. I grabbed the heavy linen tablecloth that was under the centerpiece. It was set with candles and crystal vases. "What are you doing?" Brittany screamed. I didn't answer. I yanked the cloth. The centerpiece crashed to the floor. The crystal shattered. The candles rolled under the table. I took the thick fabric and wrapped it around Leo, covering his freezing body, burying him in the warmth of the linen. There, son," I whispered, rubbing his back. "Grandpa is here." Darnell finally stood up. My son. The boy I had taught to ride a bike. The man I had put through university. He stood there in his designer sweater, looking back and forth between his wife and his father. He looked terrified. But he wasn't afraid for his son. He was afraid of the conflict. He was afraid of her. "Dad, please," Darnell pleaded, his voice shaking. "You are making a scene. Just put the tablecloth back. We can talk about this later. You are upsetting Brittany. You know she has anxiety." I looked at him. I looked at the weakness in his eyes. "Anxiety?" I asked. "Your son has hypothermia, Darnell." She didn't mean it. Darnell stammered, avoiding my gaze. "It was just a misunderstanding. Leo can be difficult. You know how he is. He gets in the way. He is clumsy. Brittany is just trying to teach him manners. Please, Dad, just apologize. Fix the door. We can sit down and have a drink and forget this happened. Please. For me. Apologize." He wanted me to apologize. He wanted me to sweep this under the rug so he could go back to eating his turkey and pretending his life was perfect. He was willing to sacrifice his own flesh and blood to keep the peace with a woman who hated him. That was the moment my heart hardened. That was the moment I realized I had not just lost a son, I had raised a coward. "I am not apologizing," I said. "And we are not eating." I looked at the table. The massive roasted turkey sat there glistening under the chandelier. It was the centerpiece of their lie. It was the symbol of their fake gratitude. I grabbed the silver platter with both hands. The metal was hot, but I didn't feel it. "Dad, no," Darnell shouted, reaching out. I heaved the platter with all the strength in my old shoulders. The 20-pound bird flew across the room. It hit the silk wallpaper with a sickening thud. Grease and stuffing exploded everywhere. The carcass slid down the wall, leaving a trail of oil and herbs before landing on the pristine white carpet. The room went dead silent. "You animal," Brittany shrieked. Her face turned purple. She lost all control. The mask of the sophisticated hostess fell away completely. She lunged at me. She raised her hand high, her fingers curled into claws, aiming for my face. I didn't flinch. I caught her wrist in midair. My grip was like iron. Years of pulling cable and turning wrenches had made my hands strong. I held her there, her arm suspended her face inches from mine. "Let go of me!" she screamed, struggling against my grip. "You filthy old man! You touch me!" I said, my voice a low growl, "and I will defend myself." She stopped struggling. She looked at me with pure venom. She looked at Leo, who was watching us with wide, terrified eyes. "Why do you care so much?" She spat the words at me. "Why do you care about that retard? He isn't even yours." The words hung in the air. "Poisonous. Irreversible." Darnell gasped. "Brittany, stop." "I won't stop," she yelled, turning on Darnell. "I am tired of pretending." "Look at him, Darnell. He is useless. He can't talk right. He is slow. And he isn't even mine. He is the baggage you brought into this marriage from that whore you dated in college." I tried, Darnell. I tried to be nice. But I am done. I am pregnant with our real child now. A child who will be perfect. I don't want this mistake living in my house anymore. She looked back at me, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "You heard me, old man. He is a stepchild. He is nothing to me. I don't have to love him. I don't have to feed him. And I certainly don't have to let him ruin my holidays." I let go of her wrist. She stumbled back, rubbing her arm. I looked at Darnell. He was pale. He looked like he was going to be sick. He knew this. He knew she felt this way. And he stayed. He let her treat his son like garbage because he was too weak to leave. "You are right, Brittany," I said. I pulled a handkerchief from my pocket and wiped my hands as if I had touched something dirty. "You don't have to let him live in your house." I looked around the room. I looked at the ruined dinner. I looked at the broken door. I looked at the Harrington parents standing there with their mouths open, clutching their pearls and their wine glasses. "Because this isn't your house." Brittany laughed. It was a sharp, hysterical sound. "Oh, we are back to this again. The senile delusions." Darnell, tell him. Show him the deed. Show him whose name is on the mail. This is my house. I decorated it. I chose the curtains. I chose the rugs. It is mine, and I am ordering you to leave. She pulled her phone from her pocket. "I am calling the police," she threatened. "I am going to have you arrested for assault and destruction of property. You will rot in a cell tonight, Bernard." "Go ahead," I said. "Call them." I reached into my own pocket. My phone felt heavy and cool in my hand. I unlocked the screen. I scrolled down to the contacts. I didn't have many. I didn't need many. But the one I needed was right at the top. Strickland Law. Mr. Strickland was not a nice man. He was a shark. He was the kind of lawyer you hired when you wanted to burn the earth and salt the ground. I had kept him on retainer for 20 years for my business dealings. He handled my patents, he handled my real estate, and he handled the blind trust that owned this very house. I pressed the call button. I put it on speakerphone. The phone rang once, twice. Freeman Strickland's voice barked. "It is Thanksgiving. This better be good." "It is better than good," I said, looking straight into Brittany's eyes. "It is an eviction." I watched the color drain from her face. She lowered her phone. She looked at Darnell. Darnell looked at the floor. "What are you talking about?" she whispered. I smiled. But it wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of the executioner. "Execute the clause, Strickland," I said. "The morality clause. The abuse clause. I want them out. Tonight." "Consider it done," Strickland said. "I am sending the sheriff over with the paperwork now." I hung up the phone. The room was silent except for the wind whistling through the broken door. The party was over. The turkey was on the floor, and the reckoning had just begun. "You think I am bluffing?" Brittany sneered, her voice dripping with the kind of confidence only ignorance can provide. She stepped closer to me, her expensive heels crunching on the broken glass of the centerpiece I had pulled to the floor. "Darnell, show him. Go to the safe and get the papers. Show this old fool that his name isn't on anything except the rust bucket truck outside." I looked at my son. Darnell was sitting at the dining table with his head in his hands. He looked small. He looked like the boy who used to hide behind my legs when thunder shook our apartment in Chicago. But he wasn't a boy anymore. He was a 35-year-old man who had built his entire life on a foundation of lies and wet sand. "Darnell," Brittany barked, snapping her fingers at him like he was a disobedient dog. "Did you hear me? Get the deed. Humiliate him so he leaves." Darnell didn't move. His shoulders shook. A sound escaped his throat, a whimpering noise that embarrassed me to my core. I took a step toward him. The crowbar was still in my right hand, heavy and cold. I didn't raise it. I didn't have to. My presence was enough. "Tell them, Darnell," I said, my voice low and rumbling like a generator coming online. "Tell your wife the truth. Tell her parents how you afford this lifestyle. Tell them who actually signs the checks." Darnell looked up. His face was gray and sweaty. He looked at Brittany, who was tapping her foot impatiently. He looked at Mr. and Mrs. Harrington, who were watching him with narrow, suspicious eyes. I can't get the deed," Darnell whispered. Brittany threw her hands in the air. "Why not? Did you lose the combination to the safe again? God, Darnell, you are useless." "I don't have the deed because I don't own the house," Darnell blurted out. The words hung in the cold air of the dining room. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. Brittany stopped tapping her foot. Her mouth opened slightly. She looked at Darnell, then at the walls of the mansion she had spent 3 years decorating, then back at Darnell. "What did you say?" she asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "I rent it," Darnell said, tears finally spilling onto his cheeks. "I rent it from Freeman Holdings, LLC. "And who owns Freeman Holdings, LLC? I asked, stepping closer. "You do, Dad." Darnell sobbed. "You own it. You own everything." Brittany staggered back as if I had slapped her. She grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself. Her face went from red to a ghostly pale. She looked at her parents. Mr. Harrington looked like he was having a stroke. His face was purple. His mouth worked silently like a fish on a dock. "You lied to me," Brittany whispered. "You told me you were a partner. You told me your investments paid for this house. You told me we were building equity. I tried to tell you," Darnell pleaded, standing up and reaching for her. "But you wanted the house in the gated community. You wanted the country club membership. My credit score was 600, Brittany. I couldn't even get a loan for a Honda Civic, let alone a $1.5 million estate. Dad did it. Dad bought it cash so we would have a place to live. He charges us $1 a month, Brittany. $1. $1, I repeated. I gave you a castle for $1 a month, Darnell, and the only condition was that you treat this home and the people in it with respect. And tonight I find my grandson freezing in the snow while you drink wine. You broke the contract, son." Brittany turned on him. Her eyes were wild. "You are telling me that we are tenants, that we are living here on charity from him, from a mechanic." "I am an engineer," I corrected her sharply. "But yes, you are living on my charity." And charity just ran out. The phone in my hand beeped. Strickland was still on the line, waiting patiently like a shark circling a life raft. I held the phone up high so everyone in the room could hear the voice of doom. "Mr. Strickland," I said, "please explain the situation to my former tenants." The voice that came out of the speaker was dry, crisp, and devoid of any emotion. It was the voice of the law. "Certainly, Mr. Freeman. Mr. Darnell Freeman signed a lease agreement 3 years ago. Clause 4B specifically states that any illegal activity on the premises, including domestic abuse or child endangerment, results in immediate termination of the lease without notice. Furthermore, the lease stipulates that the tenant must vacate the property immediately upon termination. Failure to do so constitutes criminal trespassing." Brittany shook her head frantically. No, this isn't real. You can't just kick us out. We have rights. We have tenancy rights. This takes months. You have to go to court." "Actually," Mrs. Freeman Strickland's voice cut in, "since the rent is $1 per month, this is classified as a tenancy at will under state law, not a standard rental agreement. Combined with the documented endangerment of a minor, which I am reporting to the authorities as we speak, you have exactly 0 rights to remain on the premises. The sheriff has been notified of the trespassing. I suggest you pack quickly." Mr. Harrington stepped forward. He puffed out his chest, trying to regain some of the dignity he had lost in the last 5 minutes. "Now see here," he boomed, pointing a finger at the phone. "I don't know who this is on the line, but this is a scam. I know a scam when I hear one. Look at this man." He pointed at me with a look of pure disgust. "Look at his clothes. Look at his hands. You expect me to believe that this man owns a holding company. You expect me to believe he owns this estate. He is a laborer. He probably fixes the toilets. This is some elaborate trick Darnell has cooked up to hide his gambling debts or something." I looked at Harrington. I saw the prejudice burning in his eyes. He couldn't wrap his small mind around the fact that a black man in work boots could buy and sell him 10 times over. He needed me to be poor. He needed me to be beneath him so he could feel superior. "It is no scam, Harrington," I said. "I built the grid that powers your house. I hold patents on the transformers that regulate the electricity in your factory. I made my money with my brain and my hands while you made yours by inheriting it." "Lies," Harrington shouted. "Darnell, call the police. Tell them your father has lost his mind. Tell them he is threatening us with a weapon. We will have him committed. We will take power of attorney. We will stop this nonsense right now." Brittany's eyes lit up. Yes, that is it. He is senile. He is attacking us. Darnell, do it." Darnell looked at me. He looked at the crowbar in my hand. He looked at Leo, who was still wrapped in the tablecloth eating turkey with his hands watching the adults destroy each other. "I can't," Darnell whispered. "It is true. He owns it all." "You are pathetic," Harrington spat at Darnell. "You are a liar and a coward. I knew we should never have let Brittany marry you. I knew you were not one of us." "One of us," I laughed, a bitter, hard sound. "You mean decent people. Because from where I am standing, you are the ones who let a child freeze. You are the ones who judge a man by his coat. You are not elite Harrington. You are just expensive trash." The sound of sirens cut through the night air. Blue and red lights flashed against the snow outside the bay window, illuminating the wreckage of the dining room. Finally, Brittany smiled. It was a cold, twisted smile. "I didn't need Darnell," she hissed. "I called them 10 minutes ago. When you broke the door, I told them there was an intruder. A violent intruder with a weapon." She looked at the crowbar in my hand. "I told them you were threatening to kill us." I looked out the window. 2 squad cars had screeched to a halt in the driveway. 4 officers were getting out. They had their guns drawn. They were moving fast, tactical, and aggressive. They saw a broken door. They saw a black man with a weapon inside a mansion in a white neighborhood. I knew exactly how this looked. I knew exactly how dangerous this was. I had lived 69 years in this country. I knew the statistics. "Put the crowbar down." Bernard Strickland's voice came from the phone, urgent now. "Put it down and put your hands up. Do not give them a reason." I looked at Leo. He had stopped eating. He looked terrified. "It is okay, son," I said softly. "Grandpa is just going to talk to the nice officers." I slowly bent down and placed the heavy iron bar on the rug. I stood up and raised my hands in the air. Brittany started screaming the moment the officers reached the porch. "Help us! He is crazy. He has a weapon. He hit my husband. He hit my child." She was lying. She was weaving a narrative that could get me killed. She grabbed Leo and pulled him roughly into her arms, pinching him so he would cry. "Save us," she shrieked. The officers rushed through the broken door. Their flashlights blinded me. Their voices were shouting overlapping commands. "Get on the ground! Get on the ground now! Hands behind your head!" I went to my knees. I interlocked my fingers behind my head. I felt the cold barrel of a gun press against the back of my neck. I smelled the leather of the holster and the sweat of the young officer. "Don't move!" The officer screamed. I didn't move. I stared at the floor. I watched Brittany's shoes. She was standing there hugging Leo, looking down at me with a triumphant smirk. She thought she had won. She thought the badge and the gun would protect her lies. She didn't know that Strickland was still on the line recording everything. She didn't know that the security cameras I had installed in the house, the cameras I controlled, were capturing every second of her performance. She thought this was the end. But she was wrong. This was just the evidence I needed to bury her. My cheek was pressed against the cold hardwood floor. The weight of a knee dug into my lower back, driving the air from my lungs. I could see dust motes dancing in the beam of the tactical flashlight that was blinding me. I could smell the gun oil and the sharp metallic scent of adrenaline rolling off the young officer above me. He broke in. Brittany screamed, her voice reaching a pitch that shattered the last remnants of peace in the house. "He is insane, officer. He has dementia. He came here demanding money, and when we refused, he went to his truck and got a weapon. Look at the door. Look at my husband. He assaulted us." She was putting on the performance of a lifetime. She stood near the fireplace, clutching Leo so tight his knuckles were white. She had positioned herself perfectly under the warm glow of the recessed lighting, the grieving, terrified mother protecting her young from the violent intruder. It was a lie so bold and so ugly it made my stomach turn. I did not resist. I did not fight. I knew that any sudden movement, any twitch of a muscle could end my life right there on my son's expensive rug. I lay still, my hands interlocked behind my head, listening to the click of the handcuffs tightening around my wrists. The metal bit into my skin, cold and unforgiving. "Get him up," the officer on my back barked. They hauled me to my feet. My bad hip screamed in protest, but I bit my tongue. I stood there humiliated in front of my son, who was still sitting at the table, head in his hands, too cowardly to look at me. Too cowardly to tell the truth. "He threatened to kill us." Brittany continued, her eyes wild with fake tears. "He said he was going to burn the house down. Thank God you arrived. He is dangerous. He needs to be locked up." Leo suddenly twisted in her grip. He was small and weak from the hypothermia, but fear gave him a burst of strength. He saw me in handcuffs. He saw the men with guns pushing his grandfather. "Grandpa," he cried out, his voice cracking. "No, don't hurt him." Brittany tried to shush him, clamping a hand over his mouth, but he bit her. She yelped and let go. Leo scrambled away from her. He tried to run toward me, his bare purple feet slapping against the wood floor. He took 2 steps, then his legs gave out. He didn't make a sound when he fell. He just crumpled like a puppet whose strings had been cut. He hit the floor hard. "Leo!" I shouted, struggling against the officer holding my arm. The room froze. For a second, nobody moved. The little boy lay there on the rug, shivering violently, his skin a terrifying shade of gray against the dark wood. "Officer," I said, my voice steady and hard, cutting through the chaos. "Forget about me. Look at the boy." One of the officers, a woman with a sharp face and observant eyes, holstered her weapon. She stepped past me. She knelt beside Leo. She touched his forehead and recoiled. "He is freezing," she said, looking up at her partner. "He is ice cold." She reached for the tablecloth I had wrapped him in, trying to adjust it. As she moved the fabric, the oversized t-shirt Leo was wearing rode up his back. I saw her eyes widen. I saw her breath catch. Brittany rushed forward, trying to block the view. "He is fine," she said quickly, her voice rising in panic. "He just has the flu. He is clumsy. He falls a lot. We need to get him to bed." "Step back, ma'am," the female officer ordered. Her voice was no longer polite. It was the voice of authority. She gently lifted the back of Leo's shirt. The room went silent. Even the wind outside seemed to stop. Across my grandson's small back there were lines, angry red welts. Some were old and faded, turning yellow and brown. Others were fresh purple and swollen. They crisscrossed his skin like a road map of pain. They were the unmistakable marks of a belt buckle. I closed my eyes. I had suspected. I had feared. But seeing the physical proof of my failure to protect him, broke something inside me that could never be fixed. The female officer stood up slowly. She turned to look at Brittany. Her hand rested instinctively on her belt, not on her gun, but near it. The look on her face had changed completely. The suspicion was gone. The hostility toward me was gone. In its place was a cold, professional rage. "Did you do this?" she asked, pointing at the child on the floor. Brittany sputtered. "No, of course not. He plays rough. He climbs trees. He gets into fights at school. He is a difficult child. You don't understand." The officer looked at Darnell. Darnell was weeping silently, tears dripping off his nose onto his cashmere sweater. He didn't say a word. He didn't defend his wife. He didn't defend his son. He just cried. Leo stirred. "Leo." He pushed himself up on shaking arms. He looked at the female officer. He looked at Brittany. Then he looked at me. "Grandpa," he whispered, "I didn't mean to break the plate. I am sorry." The female officer knelt back down. She softened her face. She spoke to him like he was her own child. "Hey, buddy," she said softly. "It is okay. You are not in trouble. Can you tell me how you got those marks on your back?" Leo looked at Brittany. Brittany glared at him, her eyes promising retribution, promising pain. Leo flinched. He looked back at the officer. "Mom." "Brittany," he stuttered. She gets mad when I mess up her videos. She says I have to learn. She uses the belt." The officer nodded slowly. "And why were you so cold, buddy?" "She put me in the timeout corner," Leo said, a tear sliding down his frozen cheek. "Outside, by the bush. She said I had to think about what I did. She said if I came in, she would send me away." The female officer stood up again. She looked at her partner. The male officer, who was still holding my arm, loosened his grip. I felt the tension leave his body, replaced by the same disgust I felt. "Uncuff him," the female officer said. But the male officer started to protest. "Uncuff him. Right now," she repeated, her voice like a whip. "We have the wrong suspect." The metal clicks of the handcuffs unlocking were the sweetest sound I had ever heard. I rubbed my wrists. I didn't look at the officers. I walked straight to Leo. I picked him up. I sat on the floor with him, holding him against my chest, rocking him back and forth. "You are safe now, Leo," I whispered into his hair. "I promise you are safe." The officers turned on Brittany and Darnell. The atmosphere in the room had shifted so violently it felt like the air pressure had dropped. They were no longer standing in a mansion talking to the homeowners. They were standing in a crime scene talking to perpetrators. "Ma'am, sir," the male officer said, his hand hovering near his radio. "We are going to need you to step away from the child. We are calling Child Protective Services immediately. This is now an investigation into aggravated child abuse and endangerment." Brittany's face went from pale to red. The mask of the victim crumbled and the monster underneath snarled. "You can't do this," she screamed. "Do you know who my father is? Do you know who we are? This is my house. That brat is a liar. He is lying to get attention. Stop talking," the officer warned. "Anything you say can be used against you." Brittany spun around and grabbed Darnell by the lapels of his sweater. She shook him violently. "Fix this," she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "Fix this, Darnell. If CPS gets involved, if this gets out, your career is over. You will be fired. We will lose everything. Tell them. Tell them the kid is a liar. Tell them he did it to himself." She wasn't worried about jail. She wasn't worried about Leo. She was worried about the reputation. She was worried about the money. Darnell looked at her. He looked at her hands clutching his expensive sweater. He looked at her face twisted in hate. For a second I thought he might finally find his spine. I thought he might finally be a man, but he just looked down. "Officer," he mumbled, "my wife is right. The boy, he has problems. He makes things up." I closed my eyes and held Leo tighter. My son had made his choice. He had chosen the lie. He had chosen the darkness, and in doing so, he had sealed his fate. The female officer looked at Darnell with pure contempt. "Sir," she said, "we have eyes. We can see the injuries, and we can see the temperature outside. You can save your stories for the judge." She keyed her radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4. We have a code 1056. Severe physical abuse of a minor. Requesting EMS and a CPS caseworker to my location immediately." Brittany backed away. She looked at me sitting on the floor with Leo. Her eyes narrowed. "You did this," she whispered. "You ruined my life." "No, Brittany," I said, my voice calm and cold. "You ruined it yourself. I just turned on the lights." The officer stepped outside to the porch to radio for the social worker, giving the room a moment of suffocating silence. The air in the foyer was freezing, but the tension was hot enough to burn. I stood between my son and his wife like a wall of concrete. Darnell was wiping his face with a napkin, his hands trembling so hard he could barely hold the paper. He looked broken. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out from the inside. "Darnell," I said, my voice low and rough, "look at me." He slowly lifted his head. His eyes were red and swollen. "You have a choice to make right now," I told him. "The police are filing the report. CPS is on the way. You can stay here and try to salvage what is left of your dignity as a father, or you can leave with her." I pointed the tip of the crowbar at Brittany, who was leaning against the wall. Her arms crossed her face, a mask of defiance. "If you stay," I continued, "I will do everything in my power to help you fight for Leo. I will get you the best lawyers. We will fix this. But if you walk out that door with her, Darnell, you are dead to me. You are no longer my son. You are just an accessory to her crimes." Darnell looked at Leo, who was sitting by the fire wrapped in the tablecloth, watching us with wide, fearful eyes. Then he looked at Brittany. Brittany did not look scared anymore. She looked calculating. She stepped forward and placed a hand on Darnell's arm. Her touch was possessive. It was a claim of ownership. "He is not staying here with you," she spat. "He is my husband. He loves me, and he knows what is at stake." I ignored her. I kept my eyes locked on my son. "Choose Darnell," I demanded. "Your blood or your poison." Darnell closed his eyes. He took a deep breath that sounded like a rattle in his chest. "Dad," he whispered, "I can't stay." My heart shattered. It didn't break. It turned to dust. "Why?" I asked, the word escaping me like a gasp of pain. "She beat your son. She left him to freeze. Why would you choose her?" "Because she is pregnant," Darnell said. The world stopped spinning. The cold wind blowing through the door seemed to freeze time itself. I stared at Darnell, trying to process the words. "She is what I asked." "She is pregnant," Brittany interrupted, stepping in front of Darnell, shielding him from me. "I am 3 months along. We are having a baby that needs a father, a baby that needs a home." She looked at me and her lips curled into a smile that was not a smile. It was a weapon. "And this time, Bernard," she said, her voice dripping with malice, "it is a real grandchild, not some mistake from a college fling, not some damaged goods like Leo. This is a pure-blood Freeman. This is your legacy." I felt like I had been punched in the throat. She was using an unborn child as a shield. She was using my own desire for family, my own obsession with legacy against me. She knew how much family meant to me. She knew I had worked my fingers to the bone to build something that would last for generations. "You are lying," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "I am not lying," she said. "Ask Darnell. We saw the doctor last week. It is a boy." She rubbed her flat stomach, staring me down, daring me to challenge her. "So go ahead," she taunted. "Throw us out. Throw your son and your pregnant daughter-in-law out into the snow. Let your new grandson freeze just like you claim Leo was freezing. Show everyone what a hypocrite you are." I looked at Darnell. He nodded slowly, his eyes filled with shame. "It is true, Dad," he said. "She is pregnant. I can't leave her. I have to protect my family." "Your family," I roared, pointing at Leo. "That boy right there is your family, and you failed him. You think having another baby fixes what you did to this one." "It is different," Darnell mumbled. "This is a fresh start." I looked at Brittany. She was glowing with triumph. She thought she had checkmated me. She thought the promise of a new heir would make me forget the abuse, the cruelty, the eviction. She thought I was just a desperate old man who wanted to see his name carry on. She was wrong. "I don't care if you are carrying the Messiah," I said, my voice cold as the grave. "You hurt a child. You are a danger to any child, and you are not staying in my house." Brittany's smile faltered. "You are a monster," she hissed. "You would kill your own grandchild." "I am saving him from you," I replied. I turned away from them. I couldn't look at my son anymore. The disgust was too strong. I needed to think. I needed to clear my head. And suddenly a thought struck me. A cold, sharp realization that cut through the emotional fog. They had been so confident. They had been so arrogant. Brittany had acted like she owned the place even when she knew she didn't pay the rent. Why? Why was she so sure of her position? And then I remembered the safe. My office was down the hall past the kitchen. It was a room Darnell was forbidden to enter. It was where I kept the business records for Freeman Holdings. It was where I kept the original deed to the house, the bearer bonds I had bought in the 80s, and my emergency fund. $50,000 in gold coins. I had installed a floor safe 3 years ago. Only I knew the combination. Or so I thought. I turned on my heel and marched down the hallway. "Where are you going?" Brittany shouted, her voice shrill with sudden panic. "You can't go back there. That is our private space." I didn't answer. I walked faster, my heavy boots thudding on the floor. I reached the office door. It was closed, but the handle was unlocked. I pushed it open. The room was a mess. Papers were scattered everywhere. Drawers were pulled out. It looked like a tornado had hit it. But my eyes went straight to the rug in the corner. The rug that was supposed to cover the safe. It was moved. I walked over. The safe door was open. It hadn't been cracked. It had been drilled. Someone had taken a power drill to the lock mechanism. It was a crude job, but effective. I looked inside. Empty. The leather pouch with the gold coins was gone. The thick envelope with the bearer bonds was gone. The file containing the deed to the house and the titles to my trucks was gone. My knees felt weak. I grabbed the edge of the desk to steady myself. This wasn't just about a broken plate or a timeout. This wasn't just about cruelty. This was a robbery. They had been planning this. They knew I was coming, or they were planning to run. They had cleaned me out. I looked at the drill sitting on the desk. It was Darnell's drill, the one I bought him for Christmas last year. The betrayal washed over me like a tidal wave. My son, my own son. He hadn't just let his wife abuse his child. He had helped her steal my life's work. I turned around. My rage was gone, replaced by a cold, deadly focus. I wasn't a father anymore. I wasn't a grandfather. I was a man who had been wronged, and I was going to collect my debt. I walked back to the foyer. I moved silently now like a hunter. I entered the hallway just in time to see movement by the front door. Mr. and Mrs. Harrington Brittany's parents were trying to leave. They had put on their heavy fur coats. They were moving quickly, trying to slip out before the police came back inside before I noticed. They were each carrying 2 large Louis Vuitton duffel bags, bags that looked very heavy, bags that clinked when they moved. "Going somewhere?" I asked. Mr. Harrington jumped. He almost dropped the bag. He spun around, his face pale and sweaty. We are leaving," he stammered. "We don't want to be part of this family drama. We are going to a hotel." I looked at the bags. I looked at the strain in Mrs. Harrington's arms as she clutched the straps. "Those look heavy," I said, stepping between them and the door for an overnight trip. "They are just clothes," Mrs. Harrington squeaked, clutching her bag tighter. "Just our things. Let us pass." I raised the crowbar. I slammed it horizontally across the door frame, blocking their path with a solid bar of iron. "I don't think so," I said. "Get out of my way, Bernard," Mr. Harrington blustered, trying to summon his earlier arrogance. "You can't hold us here. This is kidnapping." "It is a citizen's arrest," I corrected him, "because I think you have something of mine in those bags." "Don't be ridiculous," Harrington spat. "We are wealthy people. We don't need your trash." "Then open the bag," I said. I took a step forward. The crowbar was leveled at his chest. "Open the bag. Harrington or I will open it for you. And I won't use a zipper." Brittany and Darnell came running into the foyer. "Mom, Dad, just go run," Brittany screamed. But they couldn't run. I was the wall. I was the gatekeeper. Mr. Harrington looked at Brittany. He looked at the crowbar. He looked at the police lights flashing outside. He realized he was trapped. He dropped the bag. It hit the floor with a heavy metallic thud that no pile of clothes would ever make. The zipper burst open from the impact, and there, spilling out onto the wet floor, were gold coins. My gold coins. Dozens of them rolling across the hardwood, glinting in the light, and mixed in with the gold were thick bundles of bearer bonds. The silence that fell over the room was absolute. I looked at Darnell. He covered his face with his hands. I looked at Brittany. She looked like a cornered rat. I looked at the Harringtons, the wealthy elites who looked down on my work boots. They were nothing but common thieves. Well, 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 I said, my voice calm and terrible. It looks like the turkey wasn't the only thing getting carved up tonight. I looked at the officers who were walking back up the porch steps, drawn by the noise. Officers, I shouted without taking my eyes off the thieves. You better bring some more handcuffs. We have a felony in progress. You think you can just take my property? I said, standing over the gold coins. Harrington's eyes shifted. He wasn't looking at the gold anymore. He was looking at his wife, who was clutching her handbag against her chest like it contained the crown jewels. He knew I had seen her. He knew I was coming for that bag too. Don't you dare touch her, Harrington shouted. He lunged at me. He was a big man, tall and heavy with the weight of too many steak dinners. He saw an old man with a cane and a limp. He saw a target he could break. He threw a clumsy punch, aiming for my jaw, thinking my 69-year-old bones would shatter like glass. He forgot one thing. I spent 40 years hauling copper wire up utility poles in blizzards. I spent my youth in the south side of Chicago, where you learned to fight or you didn't come home. I didn't step back. I stepped in. I dropped the crowbar and caught his wrist with my left hand, twisting it outward while I drove my shoulder into his chest. It was a move I hadn't used since a bar fight in 1978, but my muscle memory didn't fail me. Harrington grunted as the air left his lungs. I swept his leg with my good foot. He went down hard, hitting the floor with a thud that shook the chandelier. He groaned, trying to get up, but I placed my heavy work boot squarely on his chest, pinning him to the ground. "Stay down," I growled, "unless you want me to finish what gravity started." Mrs. Harrington screamed. She tried to run toward the door, her heels slipping on the wet floor. She was fast for a woman burdened by fur and guilt. But I was faster. I reached out and grabbed the strap of her designer handbag. "Let go!" she shrieked, clawing at my hand. "It is private property." "Nothing in this house is private anymore," I said. I yanked the bag. The strap broke. The bag flew from her hands and hit the wall upside down. It didn't make the heavy clink of gold, it made the soft flutter of paper. Dozens of documents spilled out, sliding across the floor to stop right next to Darnell's feet. Darnell looked down. He saw the letterhead. He saw his own signature. "What is this?" Darnell whispered, picking up a thick stack of papers stapled together. "Read it." I ordered him, keeping my boot on Harrington's chest. "Read what your new family has been carrying around." Darnell's eyes scanned the pages. His hands started to shake violently. This is a lien," he stammered. "A second mortgage application. On the house. But I signed papers for a business loan. For Harrington Imports. Look closer, son," I said, my voice heavy with pity and rage. I watched as Darnell flipped the page. I watched as the color drained from his face, leaving him looking like a corpse. "Bankruptcy filings," Darnell read, his voice barely audible. "Foreclosure notices. $700,000 in debt." He looked up at Mrs. Harrington. She wasn't screaming anymore. She was looking at the floor, her face twisted in shame and anger. "You are broke," Darnell whispered. "You told me you were expanding. You told me you needed my credit line for a temporary bridge loan because your assets were tied up in overseas accounts. You said you were billionaires. We are temporarily illiquid," Mrs. Harrington snapped, straightening her coat. The market turned. "We just needed a little help. We were going to pay it back. With what I barked. With my house. With my son's credit." I snatched the papers from Darnell's hand. I saw the dates. I saw the amounts. "They have been bankrupt for 5 years, Darnell," I said, throwing the papers in his face. "They have been living off you. The dinners, the trips, the clothes, you paid for it all. Or rather, I paid for it all through you. They aren't royalty, son. They are parasites. They found a man desperate for approval and they bled him dry." Darnell looked at Brittany. She was standing by the fireplace, her arms crossed her face, hard and unrepentant. "Did you know Darnell Astor?" Brittany rolled her eyes. "Oh, grow up, Darnell. Of course I knew. Daddy made some bad investments. We had to survive. What was I supposed to do, let them starve? You have plenty. Your father has plenty. Why are you being so selfish? Selfish. The word hung in the air like smoke. Selfish. Darnell repeated, a hysterical laugh bubbling up in his throat. I let my son freeze to impress them. I let them treat my father like a servant. I signed away my financial future. And you call me selfish? They are my parents, Darnell Brittany shouted. Family helps family. You wouldn't understand that because you come from nothing. He comes from dignity, I roared, stepping off Harrington's chest and walking toward my son. He comes from a man who worked double shifts so he wouldn't have to borrow a dime from anyone. And you let these leeches convince you that you were the lucky one. Darnell looked at me. His eyes were wet and pleading. Dad, I didn't know, he whined. They said it was just a signature. They said it was for the business. I was trying to help. I was trying to be a good son-in-law. You were trying to buy their love, Darnell, I said, my voice rising. You were so ashamed of me, so ashamed of where you came from that you let them play you for a fool. You signed papers you didn't read. You gave away things that weren't yours to give. You sold your own father out to a couple of con artists in Gucci belts. I can fix it, Darnell stammered. We can sue them. We can get the money back. There is no money, Darnell, I yelled. Look at them. They are packing gold coins in a duffel bag because they don't have $1 to their names. You can't sue a stone for blood. But Brittany loves me, Darnell said, looking at his wife with the desperate hope of a drowning man. She didn't mean to hurt us. She was just scared. Right, Brittany. Brittany didn't answer. She looked at the police officers entering the room. She looked at the gold on the floor. She looked at Darnell with pure, unadulterated disgust. You are pathetic, she hissed at him. A pathetic, weak little man. I should have married the banker. Darnell stood there, his mouth open, his heart breaking in real time. And still he tried to find an excuse. Still he tried to be the peacemaker. She is just upset, Dad, Darnell said, turning to me. It is the hormones, the pregnancy. We just need to calm down. That was it. That was the moment the last thread of my patience snapped. He was still defending her. After the abuse, after the theft, after the lies. He was still choosing the poison. I didn't think. I didn't plan. My hand moved on its own. I slapped him. It wasn't a light tap. It was an open-handed strike with the rough, callous palm of a man who has engaged manual labor for 50 years. It connected with his cheek with a crack that sounded like a pistol shot. Darnell's head snapped to the side. He stumbled back, holding his face. He looked at me with shock. I had never hit him in his life. Not once. Wake up, I screamed at him, my chest heaving. Wake up, Darnell. There is no baby. There is no love. There is only a thief and a fool, and you are the fool. I pointed at the door. I pointed at the officers who were now handcuffing Mr. Harrington. This isn't a family dispute anymore, I declared, my voice shaking with the force of my anger. This is a crime scene, and I am pressing charges against every single person in this room who touched my money, my house, or my grandson. I looked Darnell dead in the eye. And that includes you, son. You signed the papers. You opened the safe. You are an accomplice. Get out of my sight before I forget that I raised you. Darnell stared at me, tears streaming down his face, his hand still clutching his stinging cheek. He finally saw it. He finally saw the end of the road. Lawyer up, Darnell, I said, turning my back on him to pick up Leo. Because I am coming for everything. The sheriff took the Harringtons away in handcuffs, their protests echoing into the snowy night, but Brittany did not run. She did not hide. She stood in the middle of the ruined foyer, surrounded by the wreckage of her perfect life, and she smiled. It was a terrifying expression, a rictus of pure malice that made the hair on my arms stand up. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. She didn't call a lawyer. She didn't call a friend. She opened an app and tapped the screen 3 times. The ring light on her phone case illuminated her face, casting eerie shadows in the hollows of her eyes. She took a deep breath, and in an instant she transformed. Her shoulders slumped. Her lower lip began to tremble. She reached up and ripped the shoulder of her expensive dress, exposing her bra strap. She messed up her hair, creating a disheveled, frantic look. Then she hit the record button. "Help me," she whispered into the camera, her voice thick with fake tears. "Please, someone help me. I am trapped in my house. My father-in-law just beat my parents. He sent them to jail, and now he is coming for me." I stood there frozen by the sheer audacity of her performance. Darnell looked up from his hands, his eyes wide with horror as he realized what she was doing. "Brittany, stop!" Darnell said, weak and pleading. Don't do this. She ignored him. She turned the camera so it caught me standing in the hallway holding the crowbar I had used to block the door. Look at him, she sobbed, pointing the lens at me. Look at the weapon. He is crazy. He has been drinking all day. He came here demanding money, and when I said no, he attacked us. But that is not the worst part. She lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper, leaning into the camera as if sharing a dirty secret with the world. The viewer count on the screen started climbing rapidly, hundreds, then thousands of people tuning into the drama. He touched me, she said. The air left the room. He cornered me in the kitchen while my husband was in the bathroom. She lied, tears streaming down her face, now wet and convincing. He said disgusting things. He said that since my husband couldn't satisfy me, maybe a real man should. He tried to force himself on me. That is why I kicked him out earlier. That is why he broke down the door. He came back to finish what he started. He is a predator. My blood turned to ice. This was the nuclear option. She wasn't just accusing me of violence. She was accusing me of the one thing that would turn the entire world against a man instantly. She was weaponizing her femininity, weaponizing the current social climate, and aiming it directly at my throat. You are lying, I roared, stepping forward. See? She shrieked, backing away, her camera shaking. See how aggressive he is. He is going to kill me. Darnell, do something. Save me. She ended the stream. The screen went black, but the damage was done. The video was out there. It was processing. It was being shared. It was spreading like a virus through the veins of the internet. I looked at her. She dropped the act instantly. She wiped her eyes, careful not to smudge her mascara too much. She looked at me with cold, dead eyes. Good luck explaining that to a jury, Bernard, she said. Who are they going to believe? The pregnant, crying white woman in a torn dress, or the angry black man with a crowbar and a criminal record for assault? Oh wait, you don't have a record yet. But you will. My phone started buzzing in my pocket, once, twice. Then a continuous vibration that rattled against my leg. Notifications, alerts, text messages from numbers I didn't know. I pulled it out. My social media accounts, which I barely used, were exploding. Die, you animal, one comment read. I hope they put you under the jail, read another. If I see you on the street, you are a dead man. The internet mob had mobilized. They didn't need facts. They didn't need evidence. They had a 10-second clip of a crying woman, and that was enough to condemn me. Darnell stood up. He was shaking. He looked at his phone. He looked at me. Dad, he said, his voice high and panicked. My boss just texted me. He saw the link. Someone tagged the company. He said, I am suspended pending an investigation. He said they don't employ people associated with predators. He looked at Brittany. Why did you say that? Why did you lie? Brittany laughed. It was a harsh barking sound. I did what I had to do, Darnell. I am protecting our future. If he goes to jail for this, we get the house. We get control of the assets. It is his word against mine, and I always win. Crash. The sound of shattering glass came from the living room. A brick had flown through the front window, landing on the carpet amidst a shower of shards. Snow blew in through the jagged hole. I ran to the window. Outside on the street, a group of teenagers had gathered. They were filming with their phones, shouting obscenities. A car slowed down and the driver leaned on the horn, screaming murderer out the window. The mob was here. They had geolocated the house from the video. We are not safe here, I said, grabbing Leo, who was cowering by the fireplace. We need to leave. Darnell grabbed my arm. His grip was surprisingly strong, born of pure terror. No, Dad, wait, he said. You can't leave. If you leave, it looks like you are guilty. You have to fix this. Fix it, I asked, looking at him in disbelief. How do I fix a lie like that, Darnell? Apologize, he said. I stared at him. I thought I had misheard. What did you say? Just apologize. Darnell pleaded, tears running down his face again. Go on camera. Say you were drunk. Say you made a mistake. Say you are sorry. If you confess to a lesser charge, maybe they will go easy on you. We can say you are seeking help. We can say it is dementia. Brittany will drop the charges if you sign over the house. Right, Brittany. Brittany nodded, crossing her arms. If he signs over the deed and leaves the state tonight, I will post a retraction. I will say it was a misunderstanding caused by his medical condition. I will save him from prison. But I want everything. The house, the trucks, the accounts. I looked at my son. He was asking me to admit to a sex crime. He was asking me to destroy my name, my legacy, and my freedom just so he could keep his comfortable life. He was willing to brand his own father a predator to save his own skin. "Get off me," I said, shoving him away. I looked at him with a disgust so profound it made me nauseous. "You are not a man," I said. "You are a husk. You are empty. I would rather die in prison than admit to a lie like that." I pulled out my phone again. I didn't look at the hate comments. I didn't look at the death threats. I went to my secure contacts. I needed help. I needed the kind of help you couldn't get from the police. I needed a ghost. I dialed a number I hadn't used in 5 years. "Elias," I said when the line clicked open. Bernard, the voice on the other end, was rough like gravel in a blender. "It is Thanksgiving. Why are you calling me on the encrypted line? I have a situation," I said, walking into the kitchen away from the broken window and the screaming mob outside. "I need you to access the cloud server for the property at 124 Oak Ridge Drive." "You installed a proprietary system there, didn't you?" Elias asked. I can hear the typing of his keyboard in the background. The rhythm was fast, frantic. "Yes," I said. "I am the admin. But I don't have my laptop. I need you to pull the footage from the interior cameras, specifically the dining room and the foyer for the last hour." "Hold on," Elias said. I waited. The seconds ticked by like hours. In the other room, I could hear Brittany yelling at Darnell, telling him he was useless, telling him to make me sign the papers. I could hear another rock hit the siding of the house. I could hear the sirens returning. The police were coming back. They had seen the video too. They weren't coming to protect me this time. They were coming to take me down. Bernard Elias said, his voice tense. "The system shows a manual override. Someone tried to wipe the drive 20 minutes ago." My heart stopped. Darnell. He must have tried to delete the footage while I was dealing with the Harringtons. Did they succeed? I asked, my grip on the phone tightening until the plastic creaked. Elias chuckled. A dry, dark sound. "Please, Bernard, you built the hardware. I wrote the code. They tried to do a factory reset, but they didn't have the master key. The data is still in the mirror partition. I am bypassing the firewall now. Get it," I said. "Get it all, and send it to my phone, and send a copy to the district attorney's secure server." "I am in," Elias said. "Downloading now. It is a big file, 4K resolution, audio and video. Give me 60 seconds. 60 seconds. I walked back into the foyer. The police lights were flashing through the windows again, bathing the room in a chaotic strobe of blue and red. 3 squad cars this time. 2 officers were walking up the path, hands on their holsters, faces grim. They had seen the accusation. They were coming for a predator. Brittany saw them. She smiled. It was the smile of the devil himself. "Time is up, Bernard," she said. "They are here. Sign the paper Darnell wrote up, or you are going away for 20 years. You will die in a cage, and Leo will be mine. I will put him in the worst foster home I can find." She held out a piece of paper and a pen. It was a handwritten note transferring ownership of the house. "Sign it," she hissed. My phone pinged, a single clear tone that cut through the noise of the siren. I looked at the screen. File received. Download complete. I tapped the file. The video player opened. The image was crystal clear. It showed the dining room from a high angle. It showed Brittany throwing the wine glass. It showed her hitting herself in the face to create a bruise. It showed her dragging Leo by the hair out the back door and locking him in the cold. And it showed the last 10 minutes. It showed her ripping her own dress. It showed her messing up her hair. It showed her laughing as she said she would ruin me. I looked up from the phone. The fear in my chest evaporated. The anxiety vanished. In its place was a cold, hard certainty. I looked at Brittany. I didn't shout. I didn't scream. I just looked at her with the eyes of a man who had watched high-voltage arcs vaporize steel. "No," I said. The officers burst through the door. "Get on the ground," they shouted. Brittany pointed at me, screaming, "That is him. That is the man who touched me." I didn't get on the ground. I held up my phone. The screen was bright in the dim room. "Officers," I said, my voice booming. "Before you arrest me, I suggest you watch the movie." I pressed play. I turned the screen toward them. I turned the volume up to maximum. Brittany's voice from the video filled the room sharp and clear. "I will ruin him. I will say he touched me. No one will believe an old black man over me." The officers stopped. They lowered their weapons. They looked at the phone. They looked at Brittany. The color drained from her face so fast she looked like a ghost. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. I stepped forward. I looked her dead in the eye. "Checkmate," I whispered. The officers stood there for a moment in the flickering light of the police cruisers, paralyzed by the conflicting narratives. On one hand, they had a pregnant white woman screaming that she had been assaulted by a black man in her own home. On the other hand, they had a calm, older man holding a phone that seemed to contradict everything she said. But the world outside was not calm. Through the broken window, the sound of the mob was getting louder. The live stream Brittany had broadcast was doing exactly what she intended. It was inciting violence. A bottle smashed against the siding of the house. Someone shouted, "Burn it down." The lead officer, a sergeant with graying hair and a tired face, looked at me. He didn't look at the phone screen I was holding up. He looked at the situation. He saw a riot forming. He saw a man with a weapon nearby, even if it was on the floor. He saw a woman claiming sexual assault. Procedure dictated his next move. "Sir, put the phone down." The sergeant barked, his hand resting on his taser. "We need to secure the scene. You are coming with us. We can sort out the evidence at the station, but right now I have a mob outside and a victim alleging a felony. Turn around and put your hands behind your back." Brittany let out a sob of relief that was so theatrical it deserved an award. "Thank God," she cried, clutching her chest. "Get him out of here. He is dangerous. He is a monster. Look at my dress. Look at my face. He did this." She pointed to a red mark on her cheek, a mark that I knew hadn't been there 5 minutes ago, a mark she must have inflicted on herself while I was in the office downloading the files. Darnell stood in the corner watching the officers approach me. He looked like a ghost. He knew the truth. He knew what was on the video file I had just downloaded. But he said nothing. He was paralyzed by fear, paralyzed by the woman who held his leash. I did not turn around. I did not put my hands behind my back. I knew that if I left this house in handcuffs, I would never come back. The narrative would be set. The mugshot would be on the news. The truth would be buried under headlines and tweets before I even got to the booking desk. "Sergeant," I said, my voice steady and hard like granite, "I respect the badge, but if you take me out of here now, you are arresting the only person in this room who is trying to save a life. You want to secure the scene. Fine, secure it. But before you put those cuffs on me, you need to see what happened in this room 10 minutes ago. Not on a small phone screen. On the big screen." I pointed to the 85-inch television mounted above the fireplace. It was the centerpiece of the living room, a massive black mirror that reflected the chaos of the night. "You have 10 seconds, I told the sergeant. Just 10 seconds. If you arrest me without seeing this, you will be ending your career tonight. Because when this footage comes out, and it will come out, you will be the man who protected a child abuser and arrested the grandfather who stopped her." The sergeant hesitated. He looked at Brittany. She had stopped crying. Her eyes were darting around the room, scanning for an exit, scanning for a way to stop this. "Don't listen to him," she shrieked. "He is manipulating you. He is a hacker. He does things with computers. Take him away." That was the mistake. She pushed too hard. The sergeant looked at her manic energy, her torn dress, her perfect makeup that somehow hadn't smeared despite her supposed tears. He looked at me standing still and calm. "You have 1 minute," the sergeant said, lowering his hand from his taser. "Show me." I didn't waste a second. I walked to the television. I didn't need a remote. I had built the smart home network for this house. I pulled my phone out again and tapped the screen, casting the video file directly to the television. The massive screen flickered to life. The resolution was 4K, crisp and unforgiving. It showed the dining room from the wide angle of the security camera hidden in the smoke detector. The timestamp in the corner read 45 minutes ago. The video started in silence, but the audio kicked in a second later. The sound was crystal clear, picked up by the high-fidelity microphones I had installed for the voice command system. Everyone in the room turned to watch. Darnell, the officers, Brittany. Even Leo, who was peeking out from the kitchen, looked at the screen. On the television, the Brittany of 45 minutes ago was standing in the foyer. She wasn't crying. She wasn't scared. She was furious. The video showed me walking down the hall toward the office to check the safe. As soon as I was out of frame, the Brittany on the screen turned to Darnell. "He is going to find out," she hissed on the video. "He is going to see the safe is empty. We need a plan B." "What plan?" Darnell's voice asked on the recording. "We just leave. We have the gold." "No," Brittany snapped. "We can't leave. If we leave, he sues us. We need to destroy him. We need to make sure no one believes a word he says." The Brittany on the screen reached up and grabbed the neckline of her dress. With a violent jerk, she ripped the fabric. Then she reached up and messed up her hair, pulling strands loose until she looked wild. Then came the moment that made the officers in the room gasp. The Brittany on the screen raised her hand and slapped herself across the face. Hard. Once. Twice. She slapped herself until her cheek turned red. She checked her reflection in the mirror, adjusted her hair to look more distressed, and then turned to Darnell with a smile that was pure evil. "Now call the police," she ordered Darnell. "Tell them he is attacking me. Tell them he is trying to rape me." Darnell on the screen looked horrified. "I can't do that, Brittany. That is insane." "Do it," she screamed, slapping him. "Do it, or I tell everyone you hit me too. I tell them you beat our unborn child. Do it!" The video cut to the next clip. This one was from earlier in the day. It showed the dining room before I arrived. It showed Leo sitting at the table. He accidentally knocked a plate off the edge. It shattered. The Brittany on the screen exploded. She grabbed Leo by the back of his neck. She dragged him out of the chair. She pulled off his sweater, leaving him in just a t-shirt. "You stupid little retard," she screamed. "Get out! Get out of my sight!" She dragged him to the back door. She opened it and shoved him out into the snow. She locked the door. Then she turned back to her parents and laughed. "Maybe a little frostbite will teach him to be careful," she said, pouring herself a glass of wine. The video ended. The screen went black. The silence in the living room was absolute. It was a heavy, suffocating silence, the kind of silence that comes after a bomb goes off. I looked at Darnell. He was staring at the blank screen, his mouth open, his eyes wide with a mixture of horror and relief. The truth was out. He didn't have to hide it anymore. He didn't have to carry the weight of her lies. I looked at the officers. The sergeant's face had gone hard as stone. The young female officer looked sick. She looked at Brittany with a disgust so profound it filled the room. And I looked at Brittany. She wasn't crying anymore. She wasn't acting. She was standing in the middle of the room shaking, not with cold, but with the total collapse of her reality. She looked small. She looked ugly. The red mark on her cheek, the one she had inflicted on herself, now looked like a brand, a mark of her deception. That is not real," she whispered, her voice trembling. The sergeant took a step toward her. He unclipped the handcuffs from his belt. "Ms. Freeman," he said, his voice flat and cold. "Turn around." "No," Brittany shouted, backing away until she hit the wall. "No. That is fake. It is a trick. He is an engineer. He does computer things. He made that. It is AI. It is a deep fake." She pointed a shaking finger at me. "He made it up," she screamed, her eyes bulging. "He hated me from the beginning. He used technology to frame me. You can't believe a video. Anyone can make a video now. That isn't me. I would never say those things. I am a victim here." She was grasping at straws, desperate, drowning straws. She was using buzzwords she had heard on the news, hoping to confuse them, hoping to cast doubt. "Deepfake," I said, my voice calm. "Brittany. The timestamps match the police dispatch logs. The audio frequencies match the acoustics of this room. And unless I am a wizard, I didn't generate a video of you slapping yourself in the 5 minutes I was in the office. It is fake," she screeched. "I want a lawyer. I want my phone." She reached for her pocket, trying to pull out her phone, maybe to delete the live stream, maybe to call for help, maybe just out of habit. The female officer moved fast. She grabbed Brittany's wrist. "Let go of the phone, ma'am," the officer ordered. "No," Brittany yelled, struggling. "It is my property. You can't have it." The officer didn't argue. She twisted Brittany's arm behind her back, forcing her to drop the phone. It clattered to the floor. The officer kicked it away toward the sergeant. "That phone is now evidence," the sergeant said, picking it up and sealing it in a plastic bag he pulled from his vest, along with the security footage. "You can't do this," Brittany wailed as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. "I am pregnant. You are hurting the baby." The female officer leaned in close to Brittany's ear. "We will have a doctor check on that baby at the station," she said. "And if you are lying about that too, which I suspect you are, we are going to add filing a false report and obstruction of justice to the list. You are done, lady." Brittany looked at Darnell. She looked at him with desperate, pleading eyes. "Darnell, help me," she begged. Tell them it is fake. Tell them you love me." Darnell looked at her. He looked at the woman who had forced him to lie, who had forced him to steal, who had forced him to watch his son freeze. He looked at the handcuffs on her wrists. He took a deep breath. "It wasn't fake," Darnell said, his voice quiet but clear. "I was there. I saw you hit yourself. I saw you throw Leo out, you traitor, Brittany screamed, lunging at him only to be jerked back by the officer. You weak, pathetic coward. I hate you. I have always hated you. Darnell nodded slowly, tears running down his face. I know, he said. I finally know. The officers marched her out the door. She screamed the whole way. She cursed me. She cursed Darnell. She cursed the police. But as they dragged her past the window, past the mob that had gathered to hate me, the screaming stopped. The crowd saw her in handcuffs. They saw the police taking the white woman away, not the black man, and they went silent. I watched the squad car lights fade into the distance. The house was quiet again. The wind still blew through the broken door, but the storm inside had passed. I looked at my son. He was standing alone in the middle of the room. He looked at me. He looked at Leo. He looked at the empty safe. Dad, he whispered. I didn't answer him. I walked past him to the kitchen where Leo was waiting. I picked up my grandson. Let's go home, Leo, I said. Not this house. My house. The cabin by the lake where the air was clean and the people told the truth. I walked out into the snow, leaving my son alone in the wreckage of the life he had chosen. The handcuffs clicked tight around Brittany's wrists, but she was not done fighting. She twisted her body, screaming that the metal was cutting into her circulation, that the stress was going to kill her baby. She looked at the female officer with wide, panicked eyes, begging for mercy, not for herself, but for the unborn child she claimed to carry. You are hurting him, she wailed. I am high risk. I need to sit down. I need a doctor. If I lose this baby because of your brutality, I will sue this department into the ground. The female officer hesitated. No matter what she had seen on the video, the threat of a medical emergency involving a pregnancy was a liability nightmare. She glanced at the sergeant, seeking guidance. I stepped forward. The adrenaline in my veins had settled into a cold, heavy weight. I reached into the inside pocket of my flannel jacket. I pulled out a folded envelope. It was not a thick document like the ones I had pulled from Mrs. Harrington's bag. It was thin, precise, deadly. Officer, I said, my voice cutting through Brittany's shrieking. You don't need to worry about the baby. Brittany froze. She looked at the envelope in my hand. For the first time tonight, true fear flickered in her eyes. Not the performative terror she used for the camera, but the deep primal fear of a predator who realizes the trap has snapped shut. What is that? She whispered. I opened the envelope. I pulled out a single sheet of paper with a medical letterhead. It was a copy of a surgical discharge summary from a private clinic in Miami dated 3 years ago. My private investigator had found it within 2 hours of me hiring him. It cost me $500, and it was worth every cent. There is no baby, I said loud enough for Darnell to hear over the wind howling through the broken door. There never was a baby, and there never will be. I handed the paper to Darnell. He took it, his hand shaking so badly the paper rattled like a dry leaf. Read it, Darnell, I commanded. Read the procedure codes. Darnell squinted at the paper. He read the words out loud, his voice trembling and confused. Abdominoplasty with concurrent tubal ligation. He looked up at me, his brow furrowed. I don't understand. What does that mean? It means she had a tummy tuck, Darnell, I explained. And while they were in there, she had her tubes tied. She sterilized herself 3 years ago. Before she even met you. Darnell looked at Brittany. He looked at her flat stomach, the stomach she had been rubbing lovingly for weeks, the stomach she used as a shield to protect herself from my wrath, the stomach she used as a weapon to make him abandon his firstborn son. But we went to the doctor. Darnell stammered. We went to the appointments. I sat in the waiting room. I saw the ultrasounds. You sat in the waiting room while she got Botox injections, I said brutally. You saw ultrasound pictures she downloaded from Google Images. She played you son. She played you for the biggest fool on earth. She knew I had money. She knew you were the way to get it. And she knew the only way to lock you down, to make you sign over the house, to make you turn on your own blood, was to promise you a legacy. Brittany stopped screaming. She stopped struggling. She went completely still. She stared at me with eyes that were black holes of hatred. She didn't deny it. She didn't try to lie. She knew the paper trail was undeniable. Darnell made a sound that I will never forget. It wasn't a scream, it wasn't a sob, it was the sound of an animal dying. It was a guttural, wretched noise that came from the bottom of his soul. He dropped the paper. It fluttered to the floor, landing next to the gold coins and the broken glass. He looked at Brittany. He looked at the woman he had worshipped, the woman he had put on a pedestal so high he couldn't see the dirt on her shoes. He had given her everything. He had given her his dignity. He had given her his money. He had given her his son's safety. And it was all for nothing. It was all a con. "You lied," Darnell whispered. The words choked him. "You let me throw Leo out. You let me hurt him. For a lie." Brittany sneered. Her lip curled up, revealing her teeth. "Oh, get over it, Darnell. It was a business transaction. You wanted a trophy wife. I wanted a lifestyle. We both got what we wanted for a while. Don't act like a victim." It is pathetic. That was the spark. That was the moment Darnell finally broke. The man I had raised, the gentle boy who used to rescue injured birds, snapped. He roared. It was a primal sound of pure, unadulterated rage. He lunged at her. He didn't think about the police. He didn't think about the consequences. He just wanted to destroy the thing that had destroyed him. He grabbed her by the shoulders of her torn dress. He shook her so hard her head snapped back and forth. "You monster!" he screamed, spitting in her face. "You killed us! You killed everything!" The female officer shouted and grabbed Darnell's arm. The sergeant tackled him from the side. They wrestled him to the ground. Darnell fought them. He kicked and thrashed, reaching for Brittany, trying to tear her apart with his bare hands. It was a tragedy. It was a comedy. It was the ugliest thing I had ever seen. My son, a grown man, pinning himself to the floor under the weight of the police, screaming and crying while his wife stood above him in handcuffs, laughing. Yes, she was laughing. A cold, high-pitched cackle that echoed off the high ceilings. "Look at him," she mocked, looking down at Darnell as the officers cuffed him. "Look at the big man. He finally found some balls." "Too little, too late, honey." "Get him out of here," the sergeant barked. "Get him in the car." They hauled Darnell up. He was limp now, all the fight drained out of him. He looked at me as they dragged him past. His eyes were empty. There was no light in them, just a vast dark hole where his soul used to be. "Dad," he whispered. "I am sorry." I didn't answer him. I couldn't. I just watched him go. The officers turned back to Brittany. They grabbed her arms roughly, not caring about her comfort anymore. They pushed her toward the door. As she passed me, she stopped. She dug her heels into the expensive rug she loved so much. She looked at me, and for the first time, she showed me exactly who she was. The mask was gone. The sophisticated socialite was gone. The grieving mother was gone. There was only a racist, hateful creature. "You think you won, old man," she spat. "You think you are smart. You are nothing. You are just a nigger with a checkbook." The word hung in the air, heavy, ugly, ancient. The female officer gasped. The sergeant stiffened. "You never belonged here," she continued, her voice rising to a screech. "You and your stupid son and that retard grandson, you are dirt. I did you a favor. I tried to elevate you. I tried to make you look like people, but you are just animals. That is all you will ever be. I never loved him. I couldn't stand touching him. I had to close my eyes and think of the money every time he came near me." She looked at the door where Darnell had just exited. He was a means to an end, a stepping stone. And you are just the obstacle I should have removed sooner. I should have poisoned you at Thanksgiving dinner instead of just kicking your grandson out. The sergeant shoved her. Hard. "Move!" he growled, his voice thick with disgust. "Get in the car. Now!" She laughed again as they dragged her out into the snow. She screamed slurs. She screamed curses. She screamed until the door of the squad car slammed shut, cutting off her voice. I stood alone in the foyer. The house was quiet. The wind blew through the broken door, chilling the sweat on my face. I looked at the gold coins scattered on the floor. I looked at the medical report lying in the glass. I looked at the turkey carcass staining the wall. It was over. The truth was out. The family was gone. I walked to the kitchen. Leo was sitting on the counter, swinging his legs, wrapped in my jacket. He was eating a piece of pie. He looked at me, his big eyes calm and knowing. "Are the bad people gone, Grandpa?" he asked. "Yes, Leo," I said, picking him up. "The bad people are gone." We walked out of the house, leaving the lights on, leaving the door broken, leaving the gold on the floor. None of it mattered. I had the only treasure worth saving in my arms. We got into my old truck, and I drove away into the night, never looking back at the mansion that had almost cost me everything. The squad car door slammed shut, cutting off Brittany's vile screaming and sealing her fate in the back of the cruiser. The red and blue lights washed over the snow, illuminating the driveway where my son's life had just officially ended. I stood on the porch watching as the female officer finished taking statements from the neighbors who had gathered like vultures to watch the downfall of the dynasty that never was. Inside the house, the drama was far from over. The officers were now turning their attention to the Harringtons, who were still sitting on the bench in the foyer, handcuffed and furious. Mrs. Harrington, seeing her daughter dragged away like a common criminal and realizing her own expensive handbag was now evidence in a grand larceny case, decided to play her final card. She gasped loudly. It was a theatrical sound, like a bad actor in a soap opera. She clutched her chest with her manicured hands and let out a wail that was supposed to sound like pain but sounded more like frustration. "My heart," she cried, sliding dramatically down the wall until she hit the floor. "I am having a heart attack. I can't breathe. You are killing me. I need an ambulance." The young male officer looked panicked for a second. He reached for his radio, ready to call for medical assistance. But the sergeant, who had seen more criminals try to dodge booking than he had seen hot dinners, just sighed. He looked at Mrs. Harrington with the tired eyes of a man who knew exactly what a con looked like. "Ma'am," the sergeant said, stepping over her legs. "The paramedics are already here outside checking on the boy. I will have them take a look at you. But I should warn you that filing a false medical emergency to delay arrest is another charge we can add to the list." Mrs. Harrington's eyes snapped open. The pain seemed to vanish, instantly replaced by a look of pure venom. She realized the game was up. She realized that her performance wasn't going to save her from the consequences of her greed. "You are all going to pay for this," she hissed, dropping the act completely. "We have lawyers. We know senators. You will lose your badges." I walked past her. I didn't even look down. "Save your breath, Mrs. Harrington," I said. "You are going to need it to explain to the judge why you tried to steal $50,000 in gold from a man you called a savage." The paramedics came in then. They checked her vitals quickly. Blood pressure normal. Pulse elevated but steady. No signs of cardiac distress. Just a case of acute panic because her house of cards had collapsed. They hauled her up and marched her out to the second squad car right next to her husband. Now the house was truly empty. The thieves were gone. The police were finishing their paperwork. The only people left were me, Leo, who was sleeping in the kitchen wrapped in blankets, and Darnell. My son was still on the floor where he had collapsed after the fight. He was sitting on his knees, his head bowed, his hands resting on his thighs. He looked small. He looked like a child who had broken a window and was waiting for the punishment. I walked over to him. My boots made a heavy sound on the hardwood floor. I stopped 3 feet away from him. I didn't offer him a hand. I didn't offer him comfort. I just stood there, a silent judge, waiting for him to speak. Darnell slowly lifted his head. His face was a mess of tears and snot. His expensive sweater was torn. His eyes were red and swollen. He looked at me, and then he did something that made my stomach turn. He shuffled forward on his knees. He reached out and tried to grab the hem of my jeans. "Dad," he sobbed, his voice breaking. "I am so sorry. Please, you have to forgive me." I stepped back, moving my leg out of his reach. I didn't want him to touch me. I felt like his touch would stain me. "Get up, Darnell," I said, my voice cold. "You look pathetic." He didn't get up. He slumped forward, putting his forehead on the floor in a posture of total submission. "I was blind, Dad," he cried into the rug. "She manipulated me. She told me we were building a future. She told me she loved me. I didn't know she was sterilized. I didn't know she hated Leo. I was just trying to keep the family together. I was scared, Dad. I was scared of losing her." I looked down at him. I listened to his excuses, his desperate attempt to paint himself as a victim, and I felt nothing but a cold, hard anger. "You were not blind, Darnell," I said, my voice cutting through his sobs. "You were willing. There is a difference." I walked around him, circling him like a predator circling prey. "You say she manipulated you," I continued. "Maybe she did. She is a predator. But you are a man, Darnell. You have eyes, you have ears. You saw her treat your son like a dog. You saw the bruises. You heard the way she spoke to him. You saw him shivering in the snow tonight." I stopped in front of him again. "You saw it all, and you said nothing." "But I was trying to keep the peace," Darnell pleaded, looking up at me. "I thought if I just gave her what she wanted, she would be happy. I thought she would learn to love him." "You thought if you fed the alligator, it would eat you last," I corrected him. "That isn't keeping the peace, Darnell. That is cowardice." I knelt down so I was eye level with him. I wanted him to see the fire in my eyes. I wanted him to feel the heat of my disappointment. Let me tell you something about Evil's son, I said quietly. Evil is loud. Evil screams and breaks doors and steals gold. Brittany is evil. But you know what is worse than evil. Darnell shook his head, tears flying. Complicity, I whispered. The silence of a good man. You knew it was wrong. Every time she locked him in his room, you knew. Every time she called him names, you knew. Every time she spent my money on her vanity, you knew. But you stayed silent. You let it happen because it was easier than fighting. You traded your son's safety for a quiet life and a trophy wife. I stood up, towering over him again. A man who sees a crime and says nothing is not an innocent bystander, Darnell. He is a partner. You held the door open while she destroyed this family. You are not a victim. You are an accomplice. Darnell collapsed back onto his heels, burying his face in his hands. He wailed, a sound of pure misery. I lost everything, he sobbed. I lost my wife. I lost my baby. I lost my job. Dad, please. You are all I have left. Help me. I can change. I will be better. I will make it up to Leo. Just give me a chance. I looked at the door. The wind was still blowing snow into the hallway. The house was freezing. You want a chance, I asked? Yes, Darnell begged, nodding frantically. Yes, Dad. Anything. I pointed to the door. Then stand up and walk out that door. Darnell froze. He looked at the open door, then back at me. The hope in his eyes died, replaced by a dawn of absolute terror. What he whispered. Leave, I said. Get out of my house. But I have nowhere to go, Darnell stammered, getting to his feet, his legs shaking. Brittany's parents are in jail. My friends, they saw the video. No one will take me in. Go to a hotel, I suggested coldly. You like spending money. Spend some on a room. I can't, Darnell whispered. Why not, I asked. You make 6 figures, Darnell. You drive a Porsche. Go to the Marriott. I can't, he repeated, his voice dropping to a shameful whisper. I don't have any money, Dad. I stared at him. What do you mean you don't have any money? I pay your rent. I pay your car note. You make good money at the firm. Where is it, Darnell? He looked away. He couldn't meet my gaze. I lost it, he confessed. Lost it how? Online blackjack, he mumbled, and sports betting. I thought I could win enough to pay off the Harringtons. I thought I could get ahead. I lost it all, Dad. My savings, my 401k. I maxed out the credit cards you didn't know about. I have $12 in my checking account. I looked at him. My son, the boy I had sent to private school, the boy I had taught to save. He was a gambler, a broke, desperate gambler who had sold his soul to cover his losses. This explained everything. It explained why he was so desperate for the house. It explained why he let the Harringtons walk all over him. He wasn't just weak. He was compromised. He was drowning in debt, and he had been using me as a life raft. So that is it, I said, nodding slowly. You didn't just stay for the baby. You stayed because you were broke. You let them abuse your son because you needed their approval and you needed my house to hide your failure. It wasn't like that, Darnell cried, reaching for me. I was going to fix it. Don't touch me, I barked, stepping back. I looked at him one last time. I saw the ruin of a man. I saw the waste of potential, and I felt a deep, profound sadness. But I did not feel mercy. Mercy would not help him now. Mercy had enabled him for 35 years. You are right, Darnell, I said. You have lost everything, and tonight you are going to lose the last thing you had, my protection. Dad, please, he begged, falling to his knees again. It is freezing out there. I have no coat. I have no car. Where will I sleep? I don't know, I said. I walked to the closet by the door. I grabbed his coat, the expensive wool coat Brittany had picked out for him. I threw it at him. It hit him in the chest. Put this on, I said. He scrambled to put it on, buttoning it with shaking fingers. Now leave, I ordered, pointing to the night. Dad, he whispered. I didn't say another word. I walked to the kitchen. I picked up Leo, who was watching us with wide, solemn eyes. I wrapped him tight in my arms. I walked back to the foyer. Darnell was still standing there, paralyzed. I walked past him. I opened the door fully. The snow swirled in. You watched your son freeze, Darnell, I said, looking him in the eye. Now you know how it feels. I pushed him. Not hard, but firm. A push that said goodbye. He stumbled out onto the porch. He turned around, his face a mask of despair. Dad, he cried out. I grabbed the handle of the broken door. I pulled it shut. It wouldn't latch, but I dragged the heavy oak sideboard across the floor and slammed it against the frame, sealing the entrance. I heard him pounding on the other side. I heard him calling my name. I heard him crying. I turned away. I walked back to the fire. I sat down with my grandson. "Is my daddy bad?" Leo asked, looking up at me. "He isn't bad, Leo," I said, stroking his head. "He is just lost, and he can't be found in this house anymore." I listened to the wind howling outside. I listened until the pounding stopped. I listened until the only sound was the crackle of the fire and the steady breathing of the boy I had saved. Darnell was gone. He was in the cold. He was alone. And for the first time in a long time, he was finally facing the consequences of his own life. The sun rose over the wreckage of the night before casting long, cold shadows across the living room floor, where the turkey carcass still lay staining the expensive wallpaper. I had spent the night in the armchair with the crowbar across my lap, while Leo slept fitfully on the sofa, wrapped in 3 blankets. The broken front door was barricaded, but the cold air still found its way in, carrying the bite of the winter morning. I was packing Leo a bag of clothes I found in his room, preparing to leave for my cabin, when the barricade at the front door shook. Someone was pushing against it from the outside. I stood up, my joints popping, and gripped the iron bar. "Open up, Dad," Darnell's voice shouted from the porch. "I know you are in there. Open the door, or I am calling the police and reporting a kidnapping." I looked at Leo, who was awake now and watching me with terrified eyes. I motioned for him to stay put. I walked to the door and shoved the heavy sideboard away. Darnell stood there shivering in his expensive wool coat, his face gray with cold and lack of sleep. He looked like a ghost, but his eyes were burning with a desperate, frantic energy. He didn't look like a son coming to apologize. He looked like a junkie looking for a fix. He pushed past me into the house, looking around wildly. "Where is my wallet?" he demanded. "Where is my laptop? I need to sell things. I need cash, Dad." "You don't have anything here, Darnell," I said, leaning on the crowbar. "The lease is void. The contents of this house are being seized to pay for the damages." "You own the clothes on your back and nothing else." Darnell spun around to face me. A nasty sneer curled his lip. He looked at me with a hatred I had never seen before. It was the hatred of a weak man who realizes he has been exposed. "You think you have won, don't you?" he spat. "You think you can just kick me out and take my son and live happily ever after? Well, you forgot something, old man. I am his father, his legal biological father. You have no rights here. None." He took a step toward Leo. Leo shrank back into the cushions. "Come here, Leo," Darnell barked. "We are leaving." "No," I said, stepping between them. "He is not going anywhere with you. You threw him in the snow." "And I will deny it," Darnell shouted, his voice cracking. "It is your word against mine. The video Brittany made is gone. The police report hasn't been filed yet. I will fight you. I will sue you for full custody. I will tell the court you are senile and violent. I will tell them you kidnapped him." He poked me in the chest with a shaking finger. "You want him safe, Dad. You want him happy. Then you pay me. You give me $50,000 right now, cash, and I will sign over temporary guardianship. If you don't pay, I take him. I take him and I put him in foster care. I surrender my parental rights to the state. I will make sure you never see him again." I stared at him. The bile rose in my throat. He was ransoming his own son. He was using a 7-year-old boy as leverage to pay his gambling debts. He was willing to throw his own flesh and blood into the system just to get a payout. "You would sell your son?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I have to survive," Darnell screamed. "I have debts. They are going to kill me, Dad. I need the money. 50,000. That is the price. Pay up or say goodbye to Leo." The sound of a heavy car door slamming outside cut through the tension. Heavy footsteps crunched up the snowy walk. Darnell turned around just as a tall man in a charcoal suit filled the doorway. He was flanked by 2 private security contractors who looked like they chewed iron for breakfast. It was Strickland. My lawyer. My shark. "Good morning, gentlemen," Strickland said, his voice smooth and dangerous like oil on a blade. "I apologize for the intrusion, but I believe I heard a threat of extortion." "Who are you?" Darnell demanded, backing up. "Get out of my house." Strickland walked into the room, ignoring Darnell completely. He placed a leather briefcase on the dining table right next to where the turkey used to be. He clicked the latches open. The sound was loud in the quiet house. "I am the man who is going to end your life," Mr. Freeman Strickland said without looking up. "Not physically, of course. That would be messy. I'm going to end your existence as a functioning member of society." He pulled out a thick stack of files. He turned to me. Bernard, I have the asset valuation you requested. And I have the corporate restructuring documents. Darnell laughed nervously. What is this? Another bluff. My dad is a retired mechanic. He doesn't have assets. He has a truck and a fishing rod. Strickland looked at Darnell over the rim of his glasses. He looked at him with a pity so deep it was almost insulting. Your father, Strickland said, holds the primary patents for the high-efficiency voltage regulators used in 90% of the electric vehicles manufactured in North America. He developed the Freeman Protocol for industrial grid stabilization. Darnell blinked. What? Strickland picked up a document. Your father's current net worth, including liquid assets, real estate holdings, and intellectual property royalties, is approximately $42 million. Darnell's knees buckled. He grabbed the back of a chair. He looked at me. His eyes were wide, scanning my face, scanning my dirty flannel shirt. 42 million, he whispered. Dad, is that true? I didn't answer. I just watched him. Strickland wasn't done. He pulled out another file. A blue one this time. And regarding your employment, Mr. Freeman, Strickland continued, you work for Apex Dynamics, correct? You are a mid-level supply chain manager. You make $110,000 a year. You think you are a big shot. Darnell nodded dumbly. Yes, I work for Apex. Strickland slid the file across the table. It stopped right in front of Darnell. Apex Dynamics is a subsidiary, Strickland said. It was acquired 5 years ago by a parent company called Freeman Industrial Solutions. Darnell looked at the file. He looked at the logo. Freeman Industrial, he mumbled. Yes, Strickland said. A private holding company. Sole proprietor Bernard Freeman. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a man. Darnell looked at me. He looked at the father he had been ashamed of, the father he had hidden from his friends, the father he had treated like a servant. You own my company, Darnell whispered. You have been my boss this whole time. I bought Apex to give you a job, Darnell, I said, my voice flat. You were struggling after college. No one would hire you. So I bought the company. I told the board to hire you. I told them to promote you. I wanted you to feel successful. I wanted you to be a man. I walked over to the table. I looked down at the file. I built an empire for you, son. All of it. The patents, the real estate, the company. It was all going to be yours. It was all in the trust. All you had to do was be a decent human being. Darnell started to cry. Not the fake tears he used with Brittany. These were tears of total devastation. He realized what he had done. He realized he had been sitting on a gold mine, and he had tried to burn it down for a few pennies. Dad, he sobbed, falling to his knees. I didn't know. Oh my God, I didn't know. Please. I can change. I will do anything. $40 million. We can fix this. We can get the best doctors for Leo. We can start over. Strickland pulled one last piece of paper from his briefcase. It was a single sheet, crisp and white. You are right about one thing, Mr. Freeman, Strickland said. You can do anything, except work for Apex Dynamics. He handed the paper to Darnell. This is your termination notice, Strickland said. Effective immediately. You are being fired for cause, moral turpitude, criminal conduct, and gross negligence. Fired. Darnell gasped, clutching the paper. But my health insurance. My severance. There is no severance, Strickland said, closing his briefcase with a snap. And since you violated the morality clause of your employment contract by engaging in child abuse, which is currently a matter of public record thanks to your wife's video, the company is also suing you to claw back your bonuses for the last 3 years. Darnell looked at the paper. Then he looked at me. Dad, you can't do this, he begged. I have nothing. Brittany took the cash. The Harringtons took the rest. I have debt, Dad. Serious debt. If I lose this job, they will break my legs. I looked at my son. I saw the fear in his eyes. I saw the pathetic weakness that had defined his life. I gave you a house, I said. I gave you a career. I gave you a life. And you threw my grandson in the snow. I leaned down close to his face. You threatened to sell him, Darnell. You tried to extort me. You threatened to put him in the system. I straightened up. You are fired, Darnell. You are evicted. And you are disowned. I turned to Strickland. Get him out of here. Strickland nodded to the 2 security guards. They stepped forward. They were big men professionals who moved with purpose. they grabbed Darnell by the arms. No, Darnell screamed as they hauled him toward the door. "Dad, please, I am your son. You can't leave me with nothing." "I am not leaving you with nothing," I said, watching them drag him away. "I am leaving you with the consequences of your own actions. That is the only inheritance you deserve." They dragged him out the front door. He kicked and screamed, fighting them, but he was weak. He was soft. They threw him down the steps into the snow right next to where his wife had been arrested. I walked to the door. I looked out. Darnell was lying in the slush, sobbing. He looked up at me. "What am I supposed to do?" he wailed. "I don't know," I said, "but I suggest you start walking, because the gate code has been changed." I slammed the door. I locked the deadbolt. I turned back to the room. Strickland was standing there holding his briefcase. He looked at me. He didn't smile. He just nodded. "It is done, Bernard," he said. "Thank you," I said. I walked over to the sofa. Leo was sitting up, rubbing his eyes. He looked at the door. "Is Daddy gone?" he asked. "Yes, Leo," I said, picking him up and hugging him tight. "He is gone, and he can't hurt you anymore." I grabbed the bag of clothes. I grabbed my keys. "Come on, son," I said. "Let's go to the lake. The fish are biting." We walked out the back door, leaving the mansion and the money and the memories behind. I had lost a son that day, but I had saved a grandson. And looking at the $42 million on paper and looking at the boy in my arms, I knew exactly which one was worth more. The silence in the house didn't last long. I had barely packed Leo's small bag of clothes when a new set of headlights swept across the living room window. It wasn't the police returning, and it wasn't Darnell coming back to beg. It was a white sedan with a government seal on the door. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew who this was. This was the one enemy I couldn't fight with a crowbar or a bank statement. A woman stepped out of the car. She carried a clipboard and wore a heavy coat buttoned to her chin. Her face was set in a line of grim determination. She stepped over the broken doorframe and entered the foyer without knocking. She looked at the turkey stain on the wall. She looked at the shattered glass. She looked at me, an old man in dirty work clothes holding a traumatized child in a freezing house. "Mr. Freeman," she said, her voice flat and professional. "I am Mrs. Vance from Child Protective Services. We received a police report regarding a serious incident involving a minor at this address. I need you to put the child down." I tightened my grip on Leo. He buried his face in my neck, his small body trembling. "He is safe," I said, my voice raspy. "I am his grandfather. I am taking him home." Mrs. Vance didn't blink. She looked at the wreckage of the dining room. "Sir, this is a crime scene," she said. "The front door is missing. The temperature inside is 40 degrees. There is food on the floor. This is not a safe environment for a child. Furthermore, the report states the parents have been arrested for felony child abuse. That makes Leo a ward of the state pending a custody hearing." "No," I said, stepping back. "You are not taking him. He has been through enough. He needs family." "Mrs." Vance sighed. She looked tired. She looked like a woman who had seen too many bad fathers and too many broken homes. "Mr. Freeman," she said, softening her tone slightly but keeping her authority. "I understand you are upset, but let's look at the facts. You are 69 years old. You live alone in a cabin 3 states away. You just engaged in a physical altercation with 3 adults. You are currently in a house with no heat and no security." She made notes on her clipboard. The scratching sound of her pen felt like a countdown. "I cannot in good conscience release a vulnerable minor into your custody," she continued. "We need to evaluate your living situation. We need to run background checks. We need to assess your physical and mental capability to care for a 7-year-old with special needs. Until then, Leo will be placed in emergency foster care. We have a nice family in the next county who can take him tonight." Foster care. The words chilled me more than the wind. I knew the system. I knew that once a child went in, it could take months or years to get them out. Leo would be a number. He would be the boy who stuttered. He would be alone in a strange house with strangers who didn't know he needed a nightlight or that he was allergic to strawberries. "He is not going to foster care," I growled. "I have money. I have resources. I can take him to a hotel right now. I can hire a nanny. I can do whatever you want." Mrs. Vance shook her head. "Money isn't the issue, Mr. Freeman. It is stability. And frankly, looking at you right now, I see a man under extreme duress. I see a senior citizen who just snapped. I can't release a child to someone who might be unstable." Unstable. The word hung in the air. It wasn't just her observation. It was a seed that had been planted, and suddenly I knew exactly who had planted it. Mrs. Vance's phone buzzed. She pulled it out and looked at the screen. Her expression hardened. She looked at me with new suspicion. "I just received an update from the officers processing the parents," she said. "I also have a statement here from the maternal grandparents, Mr. and Mrs. Harrington." My blood boiled. Even in handcuffs, even on their way to a cell, they were still trying to destroy me. "What did they say?" I asked, my hands balling into fists. "They claim you have a history of dementia," Mrs. Vance said, reading from her phone. "They claim you have been suffering from violent outbursts and confusion for months. They say you broke into this house tonight because you forgot Darnell lived here. They say you believe you own things you don't own. They are formally requesting that Leo be kept away from you for his own safety because you are mentally incompetent." It was the perfect lie. It used my age against me. It used my anger against me. It took the truth that I owned the house and twisted it into the delusion of a senile old man. "That is a lie," I shouted. "They are thieves. I caught them stealing." "That is why they are lying." Mrs. Vance stepped back, her hand going to her pocket, probably for pepper spray. "Sir, please lower your voice," she said. "This behavior is exactly what they described. Aggression, paranoia. You are proving their point." I forced myself to take a deep breath. I looked at Leo. He was watching me, waiting to see if I could save him. If I lost my temper now, I lost him. I had to be smarter. I had to be the engineer, not the brawler. "You want proof of my mental state?" I asked, my voice deadly calm. "You want to know if I am competent?" "I need a medical evaluation," Mrs. Vance said. "And until I get one from a certified professional, Leo goes with me." "Fine," I said. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out my phone. Mrs. Vance tensed, expecting a weapon, but I just unlocked the screen. "I am not going to wait for a court-appointed doctor," I said. "I am going to call the chief of neurology at Mount Sinai Hospital. He has been my personal physician and my golf partner for 15 years. He manages my annual physicals for my pilot's license." "Pilot's license?" Mrs. Vance blinked, confused. "Yes," I said, dialing the number. "I fly my own plane. You can't do that with dementia." I hit the video call button. It was late, almost midnight, but I knew Dr. Aris would answer. He owed me a favor for fixing the wiring on his yacht last summer. The phone rang twice, then the screen lit up. A distinguished man with silver hair and reading glasses appeared. He was sitting in a study lined with books. "Bernard," he said, his voice warm and surprised. "It is Thanksgiving. Is everything all right? Your heart rate monitor isn't sending any alerts." I turned the phone so Mrs. Vance could see the screen. "Dr. Aris," I said, "I have a lady here from Child Protective Services. Her name is Mrs. Vance. She has been told by some very unreliable people that I am suffering from dementia and violent outbursts. She wants to take my grandson away. I need you to tell her the results of my last cognitive evaluation." Dr. Aris frowned. He leaned closer to the camera. His face filled the screen, authoritative and undeniable. "Mrs. Vance," he said, his voice changing to his professional tone, the one that commanded residence and saved lives. "I am Dr. Theodore Aris, Chief of Neurology. Bernard Freeman is my patient. I examined him 2 weeks ago for his FAA renewal." He paused for effect. "Mr. Freeman has the cognitive processing speed of a man half his age. His neurological scans are pristine. He manages a complex patent portfolio and consults on industrial engineering projects that require a high level of mental acuity. To suggest he has dementia is not only medically inaccurate, it is laughable. He is one of the sharpest men I know. If he is angry tonight, I assure you it is because he has a very good reason to be." Mrs. Vance stared at the phone. She looked at the doctor. She looked at me. She saw the way I held the phone steady. She saw the clarity in my eyes. The lie crumbled. The Harrington's poison evaporated under the light of medical fact. "Thank you, doctor," she stammered. That is very helpful." "Do you need me to send over his file?" Dr. Aris asked. "I can have my office email the certified results within 10 minutes, please," Mrs. Vance said. "That would be appropriate." I took the phone back. "Thank you, Theodore. I will call you tomorrow." I hung up. I looked at Mrs. Vance. "I am not senile," I said. "I am not confused, and I am not leaving my grandson." Mrs. Vance let out a long breath. She closed her clipboard. She looked at Leo, who was clinging to my leg. She saw the bond. She saw the protection, and now she knew she wasn't dealing with a crazy old man. She was dealing with a powerful, capable grandfather. "Okay, Mr. Freeman," she said. "I will accept the doctor's statement for the preliminary hearing. But you cannot stay here. This house is a wreck. I have a suite reserved at the Four Seasons, I lied smoothly. I didn't, but I would in 5 minutes. We are going there tonight, and tomorrow we are going to my cabin. It has heat running water and a security system I built myself. Mrs. Vance nodded. She reached into her bag and pulled out a temporary guardianship form. Sign this, she said. It grants you emergency custody for 72 hours. We will have a formal hearing on Monday, but, Mr. Freeman, if I find out you put this boy in danger, I will come for him. You won't have to. I said, signing the paper with a flourish. He is never going to be in danger again. She tore off the carbon copy and handed it to me. Good luck, Mr. Freeman, she said. I think you are going to need it. She turned and walked out to her car. I watched her go. I folded the paper and put it in my pocket next to the gold coin I had kept as a reminder. I looked down at Leo. Did we win, Grandpa? He asked. We won the first round, son, I said. I picked up the bag of clothes. I picked up my grandson. I walked out of the broken house, past the turkey on the floor, past the memories of a family that never was. I walked into the cold night air, but I didn't feel the chill anymore. I felt the warmth of the boy in my arms. I felt the weight of the responsibility I had fought for. I put Leo in the truck. I started the engine. As we drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror. The house was dark now except for the porch light illuminating the shattered door. It looked like a skull. It looked dead. I turned the corner and the house disappeared. I didn't look back again. I drove toward the city, toward a hotel bed and a hot meal. Monday would bring lawyers and judges. It would bring Darnell's desperate lawsuits and Brittany's lies. But that was Monday. Tonight I had my grandson. Tonight he was safe. And for the first time in a long time, I knew exactly who I was. I wasn't just an engineer. I wasn't just a donor. I was a father again. Father. And this time I was going to get it right. The flashing lights of the police cruisers outside should have signaled the end of the night, but chaos has a way of spiraling when desperation takes hold of a narcissist. The officers were busy securing the Harringtons in the back of the squad cars, and the CPS agent was walking to her vehicle to retrieve the paperwork for my temporary guardianship. In that brief window of distraction, Brittany saw her opportunity. She was handcuffed, but her hands were in front of her, a mistake the young rookie officer would likely never make again. She wasn't looking at her husband or her parents. She was looking at the house. The mansion she had decorated to impress strangers, the symbol of the status she believed she was owed. If she could not live in this castle, she decided in a split second of pure psychosis, then no one would. She broke away from the officer holding her arm. She didn't run toward the door to escape. She ran toward the kitchen. Her heels clicked frantically on the hardwood floor, echoing the madness in her eyes. If I can't have it, nobody can, she screamed, her voice cracking with hysteria. The officer shouted and gave chase, but Brittany was fueled by a rage that defied logic. She reached the chef's kitchen, a space filled with high-end appliances she barely knew how to use. She shoulder-checked the gas range, violently twisting the heavy knobs of the 6-burner stove. The hiss of natural gas filled the air instantly, a serpent warning of imminent death. With her cuffed hands, she grabbed a roll of paper towels from the counter. She shoved them onto the burners. Then she grabbed a lighter from the drawer. She knew exactly where it was because she used it to light her expensive scented candles every night. Burn, she shrieked, flicking the lighter. Burn it all down. The gas caught with a terrifying whoosh. A ball of orange and blue flame erupted, rolling up the custom cabinetry and licking at the ceiling. The paper towels turned to ash in seconds, and the fire jumped to the silk curtains adorning the breakfast nook. The heat was instantaneous and intense. Darnell, who had been standing in the corner paralyzed by his own failure, finally moved. But he didn't move to stop her. He didn't move to save the house. He cowered, covering his head with his arms, screaming in terror. Fire, he yelled like a child. Fire, Dad, help! I did not scream. I did not cower. I spent 40 years in industrial plants where a spark meant death. I knew fire, I knew electricity, and I knew how to kill them both. I handed Leo to the CPS worker who had just re-entered the room. Take him out, I ordered, my voice cutting through the panic. Now! I didn't run away from the heat. I ran toward it. The fire alarm was blaring now, a piercing shriek that added to the sensory overload. The kitchen was filling with black, acrid smoke. Brittany was standing near the island, laughing as the flames climbed the walls. She looked like a demon, her face illuminated by the destruction she had unleashed. The officers were shouting, trying to get to her, but the heat pushed them back. They didn't know the layout, they didn't know the systems. But I did. I built this house. I knew its veins and its arteries. I ignored the fire for a second and went for the source. I dove under the sink, ripping the cabinet doors off their hinges. My hands found the main gas isolation valve I had installed specifically for emergencies. It was a quarter-turn ball valve. I cranked it hard. The metal bit into my palm, but I didn't feel the pain. The hissing stopped. The fuel was cut, but the fire was still alive, feeding on the wood and the fabric. I stood up and grabbed the industrial fire extinguisher I kept mounted in the pantry. Darnell had complained about it once, saying the red canister ruined the aesthetic of the kitchen. Today, that red canister was the only thing standing between his inheritance and a pile of ash. I pulled the pin. I aimed the nozzle at the base of the flames, not the top, just as I had been trained to do decades ago. I squeezed the trigger. A cloud of white chemical powder blasted out, suffocating the fire, starving it of oxygen. I swept the nozzle back and forth methodically, moving with the precision of a machine. The flames fought back for a moment, licking at my face, singing my eyebrows, but they were no match for physics. One by one, the tongues of fire died out, leaving behind charred wood and a thick chemical fog. The kitchen was ruined. The cabinets were black. The ceiling was scorched, but the house was standing. I dropped the empty extinguisher on the floor. It clanged loudly in the sudden silence. I stood there breathing hard, my chest heaving, my lungs burning from the smoke. I wiped the soot from my face and looked at Brittany. She was backed into a corner by two officers covered in white powder, looking like a ghost. Her laughter had died. She looked at the extinguished fire and realized she had failed even at destruction. "Get her out of here," I growled. "Before I forget, I am a civilized man." The officers didn't need to be told twice. They grabbed her roughly, dragging her through the sludge of water and chemical foam. She didn't scream this time. She just stared at me with dead, hateful eyes. I turned my attention to the other problem in the room. Darnell. He was standing by the refrigerator, untouched by the fire, untouched by the fight. He was staring at the damage, wringing his hands. "Oh God," he moaned. "The kitchen. It is ruined. How much will this cost? We need to call the insurance. Dad, do we have coverage for arson?" I looked at him, and I felt the last tether of fatherhood snap. He wasn't worried that his wife had almost burned us alive. He wasn't worried about his son. He was worried about the insurance claim. He was worried about the money. Even in the face of death, he was a parasite. I walked over to him. I was covered in soot. I smelled like smoke and sweat. I looked like a nightmare. "You are worried about the cost?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. Darnell looked at me, blinking. "Yes. I mean, this is expensive wood, Dad. We need to fix it before we sell." "We," I repeated. "There is no we, Darnell. There hasn't been a we since you let that woman put my grandson in the snow." I reached out and grabbed him by the lapels of his coat, the expensive wool coat I had thrown at him earlier. I bunched the fabric in my fists, pulling him close until our noses were almost touching. "You wanted to be the man of the house," I said. "You wanted the title, you wanted the prestige. But when the fire came, you hid. You let an old man fight the flames while you cried about the furniture." "Dad, stop. You are hurting me," he whined, trying to pry my fingers loose. "I am not hurting you yet," I said. I spun him around. I marched him toward the back door, the sliding glass door that led to the patio. The patio where the snow was deep and the wind was cruel. "Where are we going?" Darnell stammered, stumbling as I pushed him. "You like the cold," I said, kicking the door open. "You let your son sit in it for an hour. You watched him freeze from your warm dining room. You thought it was discipline." I dragged him onto the patio. The temperature had dropped. It was easily 10 degrees now. The wind cut through my flannel shirt like a knife, but I didn't feel it. I was burning with a righteous heat. "No, Dad. Please," Darnell cried, realizing what was happening. "I don't have a car. I don't have anywhere to go. It is miles to the nearest hotel. You should have thought about that before you became a monster," I said. I shoved him. I put all my weight, all my disappointment, all my rage into that shove. He flew backward off the patio and landed in a snowdrift. He floundered, flailing his arms, gasping as the icy powder went down his collar. He tried to scramble back up. He tried to reach for the door handle. "Dad, let me in," he screamed. "I will freeze." I looked down at him. He looked pathetic. He looked small. He looked exactly like Leo had looked hours ago, huddled in the snow. But Leo was innocent. Leo was a child. Darnell was a man who had made his choices. I grabbed the handle of the sliding door. Feel it, Darnell, I said, looking him in the eye. Feel the cold. Let it bite you. Let it remind you of what you did. And remember this feeling every time you think about asking me for a dime. I slammed the door shut. I threw the lock. Darnell pounded on the glass. He pressed his face against it, his tears freezing on his cheeks. He mouthed the word please over and over again. I reached for the curtains, the heavy velvet curtains Brittany had picked out. I pulled them shut, blocking him from view, blocking him from my life. I turned back to the kitchen. The CPS worker was standing there holding Leo. She looked at me with a mixture of fear and respect. "Is he going to be okay?" she asked, pointing at the curtain. "He has a coat," I said, picking up my crowbar. Which is more than he gave his son. The flashing lights outside intensified as more vehicles arrived. They were taking Brittany away. They were taking the Harringtons away. And now they would see Darnell wandering in the snow, a king without a castle, a father without a son. I walked over to Leo. I brushed a smudge of soot from his cheek. "Ready to go home?" I asked him. He nodded, burying his face in my shoulder. I carried him out the front door, past the police, past the fire trucks, past the wreckage of the life I had built for an ungrateful son. I put Leo in my truck. I buckled him in. As I walked around to the driver's side, I saw movement in the peripheral vision. Darnell had made his way around the house. He was standing at the end of the driveway, shivering violently, his expensive shoes buried in the snow. He watched me get into the truck. He didn't wave. He didn't call out. He just stood there, shaking alone in the darkness. He looked like a ghost of the man I hoped he would be. I started the engine. The heater roared to life. I pulled out of the driveway, my tires crunching on the ice. I didn't look back at him. I couldn't. If I looked back, I might turn to salt. And I had a boy to raise. I drove into the night, leaving the cold and the fire behind me. The rearview mirror was dark, but in my mind I could still see him standing there, a silhouette against the snow, learning the hardest lesson of his life. The cold does not care who you are. It only cares if you have shelter. And Darnell Freeman had just burned his down. 6 months later, the ice had melted from the lake, and the world had turned from gray to a vibrant, aching green. I sat on the porch of my cabin, a mug of black coffee in my hand, watching the sun burn the mist off the water. The air smelled of pine needles and damp earth, a sharp contrast to the smell of smoke and expensive perfume that had choked me back in November. It was quiet here. The only sounds were the wind in the hemlocks and the rhythmic casting of a fishing line. I looked down at the dock I had built with my own hands 20 years ago. Standing at the end of it was a boy who looked nothing like the freezing, terrified child I had pulled out of a snowbank. Leo was wearing a fishing vest that was 2 sizes too big and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. He was holding my old spinning rod with a focus that would make a surgeon jealous. He had gained 10 pounds since Thanksgiving. His cheeks were round and flushed with health. The dark circles under his eyes were gone, replaced by the brightness of a childhood finally being lived. He cast the line. The lure hit the water with a soft plop. "Got one, Grandpa," he shouted, turning to look at me. I smiled. It was a genuine smile, one that reached my eyes. The stutter was gone. It had vanished about 3 months ago, around the same time he stopped having nightmares about locked doors and cold places. We had spent the winter here, just the two of us. We read books by the fireplace. We built birdhouses. We learned how to identify tracks in the snow. I taught him that mistakes were just opportunities to learn, not reasons for punishment. I taught him that a broken plate was just ceramic and gravity, not a moral failing. "Bring it in, son," I called back. "Keep the tip up." He reeled it in, fighting the base with a determination that made my chest ache with pride. He landed it a nice 3-pounder. He didn't flinch when it flopped on the wood. He unhooked it gently, just like I showed him, and released it back into the water. He waved at me and went back to casting. I took a sip of coffee. This was wealth. This was the empire I had really built. The $42 million in the trust fund was just insulation. It kept the wolves away. But this peace, this safety, this boy growing strong in the sun, that was the gold. The sound of tires crunching on gravel broke the silence. I didn't reach for a weapon. I didn't tense up. I knew who was coming. The black sedan wound its way down the long driveway and parked next to my truck. Strickland stepped out. He wasn't wearing his usual charcoal suit. He was wearing khakis and a polo shirt, the closest he ever came to casual. He carried a thick manila envelope under his arm. He walked up the steps and sat in the rocking chair next to me. "Good morning, Bernard," he said, looking out at the lake. "The base are biting, I see." "They are hungry," I said, "just like justice." Strickland handed me the envelope. It was heavy. It felt like finality. "It is done," he said. "The judge signed the sentencing orders yesterday afternoon. I wanted to bring them to you personally." I opened the envelope. I pulled out the court transcripts and the judgment summaries. I read them slowly, savoring every legal term every year mandated by the state. Brittany Freeman convicted of first-degree child abuse, arson, and attempted insurance fraud. The judge had not been lenient. The video evidence was undeniable, and her courtroom demeanor had been atrocious. She had screamed at the jury. She had insulted the judge. She had dug her own grave with her vanity. 12 years, I read aloud. No possibility of parole for 8. She is going to a maximum security facility, upstate, Strickland added. She tried to appeal based on mental distress, but the forensic psychiatrist determined she was a classic narcissist fully aware of her actions. She will be 44 when she gets out, Bernard. Her youth, her looks, the things she valued more than human life will be gone. I nodded. It was fitting. She had stolen Leo's childhood, so the state was taking her future. I turned the page. The Harringtons convicted of grand larceny, fraud, and conspiracy. 5 years each in federal prison. They would lose their remaining assets to pay restitution. They would die broke and alone in a cell. And then I reached the last document, the one I had been dreading and hoping for. Darnell Freeman convicted of child endangerment and accessory to arson. 8 years, I said, my voice flat. He took a plea deal, Strickland explained. He testified against Brittany. He admitted everything. The gambling, the theft, the negligence. He cried through the whole deposition, Bernard. He asked for you. He wanted me to give you a letter. Strickland reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of notebook paper. I didn't take it. I looked at the paper trembling in Strickland's hand. "Burn it," I said. Strickland paused. "Are you sure? It might offer closure." "I have closure," I said, looking at the boy on the dock. "My closure is fishing down there." Darnell made his choice. He chose the cold. Let him sit in it. Strickland put the letter back in his pocket. He understood. He was a shark, but he was a father too. He knew that some lines once crossed could never be uncrossed. "There's one more thing," Strickland said, tapping the bottom of the envelope. "The payoff. The reason we fought so hard." I pulled out the last document. It wasn't a sentencing order. It was a decree from family court. It was printed on heavy bond paper with a gold seal at the bottom. Final decree of adoption. I read the name on the line. It wasn't Leo Freeman, son of Darnell. It was just Leo Freeman. But the legal guardian, the father on record, was me, Bernard Freeman. "We stripped Darnell of his parental rights," Strickland said softly. "It was part of the plea. He surrendered them voluntarily. He admitted he was unfit. Brittany contested it, of course, even from her cell, but with the abuse conviction, she didn't stand a chance. He is yours, Bernard, legally, morally, and permanently. No one can ever take him from you again." I ran my thumb over the gold seal. I felt a lump form in my throat, a hard knot of emotion that I had been holding back for 6 months. I had raised a son and lost him to greed. I had failed once. But life, the universe, God, whatever you wanted to call it, had given me a second chance. It had given me Leo. I looked at Strickland. "Thank you," I said. Strickland nodded. He stood up. "I will let you get back to fishing, Bernard. You have a lot of lost time to make up for." He walked back to his car. I watched him drive away until the dust settled. Then I stood up. I took the adoption decree and walked down the steps. I walked across the grass and onto the wooden dock. The boards creaked under my boots, a familiar, comforting sound. Leo looked up as I approached. He had a smudge of dirt on his nose and a smile that shone like the sun. "Did the lawyer bring bad news, Grandpa?" he asked, a shadow of the old fear crossing his face. "No, son," I said, sitting down next to him and dangling my legs over the water. "He brought the best news." I showed him the paper. He couldn't read all the legal words, but he saw his name. "What does it mean?" he asked, tracing the letters. "It means that from today on I am not just your grandpa," I said, wrapping my arm around his shoulders. "I am your dad. It means you never have to leave this lake unless you want to. It means that house, the one with the cold and the yelling, is gone forever. It means you are a Freeman Leo, and Freemans protect their own." Leo looked at me. His eyes filled with tears, but they weren't sad tears. They were the tears of a boy who had been holding his breath for 7 years and could finally exhale. "For real," he whispered. "For real," I said. "Forever." He dropped his fishing rod and buried his face in my chest. I held him tight. I held him until the sun started to dip below the tree line, painting the water in shades of gold and fire. We sat there for a long time watching the light change. I thought about the mansion I had sold. I thought about the money sitting in the bank. It was just paper. It was just numbers. This boy, this moment, this was the legacy. You know, Leo, I said softly, people think family is about blood. They think it is about whose name is on a birth certificate. But they are wrong. Leo looked up at me, wiping his eyes. What is family, then? He asked. Family is the people who bring you a coat when you are cold, I said. Family is the people who break down doors to get to you. Family isn't who you are related to, Leo. Family is who you fight for. I picked up the fishing rod and handed it back to him. Now cast again, son, I said. The big ones come out at sunset. He cast the line. The lure flew through the air, arching against the darkening sky. It landed with a splash. I watched him. I watched my son. And for the first time in 69 years, I felt completely and totally rich. The cold was gone. The winter was over. And we were home. Life has a way of teaching us that the most expensive things aren't sold in stores. I spent 40 years thinking wealth was measured in patents and property, but I was wrong. Real wealth is the peace of mind that comes from knowing your loved ones are safe. Darnell and Brittany chased status until they fell off a cliff, proving that greed is a fire that eventually consumes the arsonist. I learned that family is not a birthright. It is a privilege earned through loyalty and protection. Never let the title of family become a license for abuse. A warm cabin with a loving grandson is worth infinitely more than a cold mansion filled with lies. If you believe I made the right choice by saving Leo and cutting off my son, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories of absolute justice, 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 of absolute justice.